Good evening and welcome to the Livonia Public Schools Committee of the Whole meeting for September 16th, 2024. This evening we are going to go ahead and start. We have a big full agenda, so we will go ahead and start with item number 1, audience communications. I do not have any slips for audience communications for this evening, so we will go on to item 2, the Committee of the Whole, and we'll start with item 2A, voting delegates of the 2024 MASB Delegate Assembly. All right, so as you know, or maybe you don't know, we are going to be, most of our board here will be attending the MASB conference, which will be on it's coming up in October. Yeah, 24th, the weekend of the 24th. Every Thursday, that Thursday evening, there's a delegate assembly, and we are asked to send 4 delegates to attend that Thursday evening meeting, and then we need 2 alternates. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. I believe we have chosen our delegates, and that will be Mark Johnson, Madeline Acosta, Liz Jarvis, and myself for that evening. In the event that we are not able to make it there, our alternates will be Colleen Burton and Crystal Frank. Is everybody okay with that? Mrs.
Are we
Burton?
limited to 2 alternates, or can we put all 3 of the other board members as alternates? Do you know?
I'm not sure.
Just double
Which-
check.
I thought we
Yeah.
had. I thought we listed all 3 of the of our other board members as alternates.
Oh, perfect. So then we can add,
I'm not going.
oh, Tammy's not
You're
going to
not
be
gonna
in
go either.
attendance.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay, so we'll leave it with
Either way,
2.
it's the same then.
4 voting, and then it's our choice for the
Alternates.
alternates.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, good question. Is there's any,
But to that point,
Madeline?
Liz, are you attending the conference?
Yes.
Okay.
She's a
She's the one that, okay.
Yeah, so the delegates will be Mark, Madeline, Liz, and myself. The alternates will be Colleen and Crystal.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, Mrs. Frank.
Teresa Navalvino.
I will add her to that. I will add you to that, yes.
All right, wonderful. We can go on to item 2B, safety and security update. Tonight, we're going to hear from Mrs. Oquist and Mr. Francis regarding security and safety.
Thank you so much, President Bradford.
welcome.
So as you know, we had a chance at our study session to go over some items related to safety and security, and this is a topic of great significance within the district and as part of our school community. What we would like to do is just spend a little bit of time going over with you. Mr. Francis is going to highlight a few additions to our portfolio of security measures that we have gone through since our we've had our external report by Secure Environment Consultants. They changed from educational to environmental consultants. So as you know, they are experts in this field. They have worked with literally hundreds of school districts across our state, and they were instrumental in a couple of ways in working with us. They did, as you know, last year, a classroom by classroom, school by school, department by department review of our entire school district. They presented us with a comprehensive report, which we reviewed with the board, I believe, in a couple of different sessions. Since that time, our members of our cabinet team, we have taken a look at that and determined what would be the appropriate next steps. Of course, we involve in those conversations our partners at Plant Maria and Real Point as we're thinking about physical space and physical facilities and enhancements that we can put into place. We've worked closely with our IT department, specifically Mr. Clan, with regard to our secure entrances, the access points that we utilize, the cameras that we utilized, interior and exterior to the school, which you know have been enhanced significantly. And we also now have audio with that, which has certainly made a difference, upgrading the cameras on our buses. So there are many different elements that we can put in place. I think one of the things we heard loud and clear from SEC and from our partners in this work is you can put all of those measures in place, and it comes down to human behavior. So we need to be consistent in the policies and the practices that we put forth, because human behavior is what ensures that a secure vestibule is secure and not simply a place where people are rotely buzzed in without ensuring that they are there on legitimate business. It's making sure that we don't prop open a door so someone can get a delivery midday. It's ensuring that we are taking time to follow the procedures we put in place. And so a big piece of that is the training that we do. So the training that we do with our outside consultants from SEC, as well as the presentations that we do within each of our schools and departments. And Mr. Francis has put together a comprehensive review of all of our safety and security procedures, along with members of our cabinet team and Mr. Riley, and that has gone out to all of our principals, and they will be reinforcing those messages of beyond crisis incident response. We really want to talk about what are those day-to-day measures? Why do we use a hold in place? What process do we do when we put those in place? How do we communicate when we have a medical emergency? When we have a student in crisis, how do we handle that within the school? Because thankfully, those situations are much more common than the more significant reasons why we would need to go into an all-school lockdown. And so it's those day-to-day processes and procedures that if we are not practicing them, if they're not becoming part of our muscle memory, then it's something you have to look for and think about more deeply, and you don't often have that time. And so what we want to do is get some of those pieces just part of the lexicon and part of what we do as our normal course of business. So toward that end, a couple of years ago, we put into place this electronic, we call it a flip book. It's really a comprehensive safety and security update. We had previously only sent it to staff, and we sent to families, you may recall, the two-sided one-page sheet that really summarized what some of these pieces are. And as we get questions from families, and we both field a number of those, as does Mrs. Jenkins, our communications administrator, we really realized that there is no reason why we wouldn't want to share this detailed information with our families, with our parents, and with our community. So I asked Mr. Francis if he would take a few minutes and highlight, not every page in here, but a number of the pages to share with you, and then hopefully anyone who is watching, why we have this information compiled in one place, and why it's so important that we're all familiar with what our procedures are.
Thank you very much. Like Mrs. Oquist said, we're not going to read this to you. Everybody who's probably watching this, everybody who is around this table has received it. You can leisurely read through it, but it's just more of a just kind of pushing through the slides and calling out a few of the items, just so folks who are watching at home or might watch in the future on YouTube can just sort of get a flavor of what the idea of this electronic flip book is, and the details in it, as Mrs. Oquist said, have gone out to all of our employees, all of our families. So folks have these. So it wouldn't really be a ton of help just to sit and people listen to me or read word by word from it. But I will give a little background on some of the items as we go through, and that might be much more helpful. So we have our shared vision, and up there, and everybody's familiar with this page, but we did pull out something that was important of our shared vision. And that statement of providing a safe, joyful, welcoming environment for all who enter, and a place where students are eager to learn. And what a wonderful statement for having a vision of what we want for our students. So this is the 4 core priorities. Those are the items that we've talked about repeatedly about what is important to the district, and we want to make sure under fiscal responsibility is getting dollars that we can in places and putting them towards important projects like we have done, whether it be via the bond, the sinking fund that our community has helped support, or grants from the state of Michigan or private items. And we have our why, and this I think is worth reading through because it is very important. We say that we believe our students do their best learning and our staff do their best work when they feel confident in the safety of their learning and workspace. It is the responsibility of the district to invest in a myriad of security measures for the safety and well-being of all. Mrs. Oquist put in a nice message for all of the families, and I believe, did you do that as well with the staff?
Mhm, it's a
In
little
that-
different
in
for
that
each group.
version, because they got a little bit different audience here. Other than that, the pages as we go through are the same between the two presentations that went out.
And I'll take a moment, because it was suggested by one of our board members last week, that we include a thank you to our community for supporting the bond and supporting the Wayne County Enhancement Millage, which has allowed us to both do the physical improvements as well as really double our mental health support in the district through the Wayne County Enhancement Millage. So I made sure that we included that, so thank you for that suggestion.
So we'll get moving along now. These are just some pictures setting up the facility types of security enhancements. And what we did in this is have things that might say currently in place. In other words, those have been done in the past. And then some things that are in progress or coming soon. Those are the types of phrases we'll use so people know, oh yeah, you know what, that's in progress. I haven't seen that yet in my building, but it should be coming. And these are the questions that we've actually been garnering as, hey, when am I getting X or Y or Z? And we say, you know, that is still in progress. It is coming. For these types of items, much of what we're seeing on this page, though, just from what Mrs. Oquist said a moment ago, this comes from the bond dollars. And specifically, the start of all this was the 2013 bond, when those secure vestibules came into play and they were built, when the door hardwares started to become changed out. Those types of things were happening through that 2013 bond, and all we're doing is just carrying that ball forward as the years go by and as the 2021 bond goes into play. So you see here, just pointing out a couple items, like the PA systems, the secure vestibules, which we've mentioned, the AEDs in the buildings. We have now bleed kits in the buildings. These are things that are just going to become and have become standard in Livonia Public Schools. We have items that are either new or still in progress. A couple of highlights. We have placed some protective film on different strategic areas of glass around the buildings and across the district. We completed that. The board recalls probably me coming in very late spring for approval on that item, and that came from the 31AA State of Michigan dollars, and that was a really nice summer project for us to be able to accomplish. Other items on here, drop-down shades and the detailed security assessment that Mrs. Oquist had mentioned, and the crisis response security mapping. Those are items that we have done, and we've mostly done, and we say still in progress for this reason. Something like critical mapping or something like having a detailed assessment, we'll always keep coming back to that. The vast bulk of that lift happened previously, but we have a new building. The Livonia Early Childhood Center is a new building. It wasn't around to be walked through by the secure environments consultants folks, and we had that taken care of in August and got that report from them as well. We have the critical mapping, critical incident mapping that we've shared with our first responders. When we have, first of all, again, the ECC, but when we have structural changes in a building, off the top of my head, very simple example is Hayes. We had reconfigured a couple of spaces, put up some walls, put up a conference room. It's now structurally different. We will be updating that map and then getting that to the first responders, because if somebody's in that new conference room, that's not appearing then on the first responders map. So we want to, that's why we say this is in progress or we continue with those things.
Please have us pause at any time if there's something we haven't hit on that
Sure.
you think we should.
Thank you. Some of those that are intentionally, continually in progress, could we add continually in front of in progress? So folks
Sure.
know that it's not that it's not done yet, but we intend to always have that in
Yep.
progress. Because I imagine that there are a handful of those and they're different than those that are just flat out in progress.
Yeah, there are certain projects that you know that you're starting, you're ending, you've done
Right.
it, and you can move on. There are other items like those reviews, that if you have a change in a building,
Right.
or even just simply saying, boy, this space is now being used differently, we need to do different door hardware on it, we might need to do some type of other type of work with it. So that's a
Thank you.
great point. This page here, I won't dive down because we've had this out a couple different times, but this is just explaining what crisis response security mapping is. And the details of it, why we do it. One of the big things, and I will just take a quick moment on it, is that first responders, they are not as intimately familiar with our buildings to just say, oh, that's room, blah, 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 the art room or whatever. Our folks are intimately knowledgeable of their building. So you might have a teacher that says, I'm in the art room. And that's what they're saying. We're having an emergency in the art room, or there's a person who needs help in the art room, and that's what we're calling 911 for. Well, we now have a name of something that might be numbered on a traditional map, and the first responders won't know what room you're talking about. Now, of course, we always want to meet our first responders at the door, et cetera, but the point of that is, whatever, they actually asked, if it's got a number, we want the number. If people call it something, we want the name of what they call it, so that the first responders have both of those items on their digital map. So that's part of just one little piece of why you want to do these types of things. Got some nice pictures here.
I'm going
Some-
to actually have us
yes.
pause on the pictures, not just because we think Mr. Riley's a good guy, but really to show this is only a portion of the security personnel that the board approves us to employ each year. We spend over $1 million on school safety personnel continuously, year over year. And that cost has probably grown just because of the cost of the roles have grown. But we employ a full-time school safety administrator with a prior police and detective background, which is instrumental as a liaison to our Livonia Police Department and Fire Department. And then also our 3 school resource officers. Just as a reminder to the community, Livonia Public Schools does provide the funding for those 3 school resource officers. They are employed by the police department, but we do provide the funding for those officers, and they service each triad. And then, of course, our Blue Line security personnel are in place and available throughout our school district. So it is unusual to have the depth and breadth of the personnel that we do, and we are very proud that that has been in place for well over 2 decades. This is not a new security addition. So I really want to commend our Board of Education, our prior administration, for the foresight to create these partnerships and to have this in place, because we feel that they are extremely beneficial and very essential.
I actually moved the slides as Mrs. Oakwood was talking, because she was actually covering that portion. The one thing I'll say is the second page on this topic. We do have partnerships with both Livonia and Westland Police. We have buildings in both of those municipalities. And we also have OK to Say, which does get used. And it's an important anonymous type of reporting system that goes to the state, and the state turns around and contacts Livonia Public Schools to give us that information. So OK to Say is a very important item. Essentially, we have our district administrators working together with law enforcement, with our Blue Line, with our school resource officers. If you walk into one of our buildings, you'll see them talking together, you'll see them investigating concerns together. So it's not just a wall between the two. Our administrators, our staff work hand in hand with the security personnel that we have. And that's a super important part, because without the communications, things will break down, and you just don't have the same results. The results are important when you have the relationships. Speaking of relationships, we have amazing, amazing staff in our buildings that are there to support They're there to lift up. They're there to be community partners with folks out in Livonia and the general area. And we have put these items in place, and this has grown over the years, starting with when we had the Wayne County Enhancement Millage. That was a very big piece for us. We were able to increase our supports for mental health and for crisis, and not crisis in the sense of police and fire, but when children are in crisis and they need someone to talk to during the school day and have support and an advocate. So that, again, that Wayne County Enhancement Millage was really the kickoff to having the ability to bring this type of staff in for our students. We have mental health supports in the buildings, and we have, for example, ESAPs are at the elementaries, and we have ESTs, and we have student assistance providers at our middle schools and high schools. We have all different psychology, social workers, et cetera. Oop, I have to flip it over, thank you. I thought you were telling me just to hurry up.
No, that was my motion for clicker. I'll get it clearer.
So all of these are critical staffing members who support, lift up, help protect, help advocate, all of those types of supports. And it's not just come to school, learn your math, learn your reading, go home, because there's a lot that's going on in the life of our students. Whether they're seniors looking to try to get into their #1 college, all the way to kindergartners who are scared to death on that first day to say, wait, you're letting go of me, Mom and Dad? What's happening here? So we have those supports from top to bottom. We also have community partnerships, and this is a list of some of our big partners that we work with. Livonia Save Our Youth, GrowthWorks, Care Solace is super important with connecting our students, our staff, our families with mental health supports. We have the Easter Seals MORC. We have Livonia's Breaking Barriers for Kids and Families, Blessings in a Backpack, which has been around for many years now, it feels, and Healthy Livonia, and the LPS Food Pantry and Clothing Depot at Franklin. All of these cannot be done without our community sponsors, supporters, and they are our advocates and help us then, in turn, advocate for our children. We have done training. We have we've had an overarching security training. It's called CIRT, Crisis Intervention Response Training, and that's what SEC came and did last year, came back again this year. That is not a specific training to tell someone, when you're in this classroom, you go here during a fire, or if a person is causing havoc in the hall, you're in that hall, in that building. It's not that granular. It is an overarching conversation and thought process of what happens in a crisis and what are the things that you need to be thinking about in advance in your space with your students, all of those types of pieces. What ends up happening is we then drill down at a more granular level in the buildings. Our principals have, and Mrs. Oquist mentioned this earlier, a presentation that was put together with Livonia processes, and to say, here's what happens if there's a tornado, here's what's happening if there's a fire, here's what's happening and why we would do a hold in place, and what does that mean, and how are we gonna respond and communicate to those things. And that might look different at a K-4 in one part of the district versus a middle school in another part of the district, et cetera, which is why those types of specifics are needed at the building level and can never be brought in by someone from outside to talk about exactly where you're gonna go and exactly what you're going to do. But those two items in tandem are helpful for our staff to hear this message in a repeated fashion from different voices. We have our emergency response training that gets even more granular at a building, where we have the CRTs, the crisis response teams in each building, who've had additional training above and beyond what the entirety of a staff might have. These are the folks that have had the CPR training and the bleed kit training and the AED training. Even though the AEDs nowadays just walk you through every single step of it. But and so we keep, if you notice, we keep kind of digging down and digging down and digging down throughout this process, with folks having more and more training on this and being leaders in the buildings with others.
And I'll pause there because it really ties into the CRT in that with our entire administrative leadership team, we have done, and I've shared this with you before, a wide variety of crisis scenarios and emergency response scenarios. So we call those tabletop exercises. So we have a variety of scenarios that we put up on the screen, and a grouping of different level, different school administrators problem solve through that. And what we really break that down to is, what are you going to do in the first 3 to 5 minutes? Because that's really when you're on your own. Thankfully, we live in an area that is going to have a quick response in all likelihood from our first responders. So we always say, think about the first 5 minutes, because you are the captain of that ship and you need to know what those first steps are. And then obviously how we work with our LFD and LPD. But in the event that the principal or one of the administrators is not in the school, that crisis response team also needs to know. And that normally includes a secretary, a building supervisor, some key non-load bearing teachers who would be available to respond. So it's each of those trainings and those tabletop exercises that are so important for the people that are going to be most directly related to the immediate response.
And one final piece, this last page in the presentation that was sent to both staff and then separately to the presentation that was sent to families, we did have a link that folks could questions, comments, et cetera on there. We've already looked through the staff responses, and there were a handful of folks who had a question about something specific, maybe in their building, or just a lot of them had some comments about, hey, thank you very much, et cetera, et cetera. And we've already begun reaching out to them and answering those questions. So this is something that even the community was able to click in and give a comment.
And we really encourage, we are thrilled with the response rate we've seen from our staff, and they've had this a little longer. We sent this out to over 14,000 email addresses for our families. We have had about 1,500 views. So we would like to get that number up. We know that safety and security is high on the hearts and minds of our parents. So we encourage you, if you are listening, if you've not had a chance to open up this flip book and take a look through it and ask your questions or share your feedback related to safety and security, because we know this is a topic important to all of you, we encourage you to please take a look at it. We're hoping to get that number a little closer to the number of recipients. So please take time to look through that and share any questions or feedback you have with us.
Great.
Thanks so much, President Bradford. and the
Great,
board.
thank you so
Thank you.
much. That's a great resource for, I hope all the parents look at those and take the time to do that. That's so important.
Absolutely.
Does anybody have any questions or comments? Mrs. Burton?
Thank you. You mentioned a couple of times between both of you, hold in place. We're familiar with hold in place, with
Yeah.
what hold in place means, but can you briefly explain that to the community and why it is a more common occurrence?
Hold in place is used for multiple occurrences. It could be because we may have had a medical emergency in a hallway and you want to have that person, obviously a little bit of dignity if something's going on there, as well as keeping the halls clear for the emergency responders to come in and work. It could be that something is happening out in the neighborhood. We've had these happen before where somebody perhaps robbed a store nearby and the police are in pursuit. When we get that word, we might do a hold in that building or in the buildings that are near that neighborhood. That simply means that you just carry on in your day, except we will have classroom doors closed and we would not be accepting visitors who are unknown to us from the outside. So it all depends on the specifics of each of those incidents, but the communication is what's the key. If staff hear a hold in place, this isn't a time to panic. This isn't a time to say, oh my goodness, what's happening? Everybody call your parents. This is just, I'm closing my door. and I'm gonna continue teaching. I'll
No
get
passing
information.
time, no movement.
And it depends,
Right.
situation by situation, what the following instructions might be. Mrs. Oquist said there wouldn't be passing time. Maybe, maybe not, depends what it is. If it's a hold because something's going on in the neighborhood, we would still have passing time but we wouldn't have recess, or we wouldn't have students going outside. But we might be inside, still secure in our building. If it's a medical emergency in the hall and it was running through, let's say, passing time in a middle school or high school, we wouldn't have the students go out there because that would be disruptive to what was happening with the emergency situation for that person and for the EMTs, et cetera. So really, the key is hearing that hold, closing your door. Your doors are always supposed to be locked. We send the message out to our staff, your door needs to be locked. It can be locked and held open, it can be locked and closed. That doesn't matter to us. Building principals might say, I want them locked and closed, and that's in their purview and they can do that. But generally speaking, it's already locked. If you're teaching and your door is open and you hear that there's a hold in place, you close your door, you just keep teaching. Information will be forthcoming.
And our kiddos know that hold in place, I mean, because they've had that happen a number of times, and
Yep.
like you said, frequently it's a medical situation, and, you
And
know,
perhaps just only a few
someone
minutes.
needs a little bit of privacy while they get their situation under control, and, yeah.
And other times, it could be that there's some type of, perhaps there's a scare of some sort, a threat of some sort. We might have said, stay in there, and we're looking into that. It can be a variety of reasons, and we've narrowed ours down to the lockdown and the hold in place with instructions on the hold in place to keep the confusion to a minimum. When you have a myriad of options, sometimes it's difficult to remember, am I supposed to close the door on this one, or am I supposed to not do something on that one? We've come to the conclusion of simple is better, and we just give the hold and then come out with instructions.
Mr. Francis, I just want to address, we had a quick question here about parent pickup. And so if we're in a hold in place, we would not dismiss students at that time. We also have, if our students have had to go off to their secondary site, every school has a secondary site. It may be another school that's in close proximity, it may be a church, it may be a business with whom we've made that arrangement. Mr. Riley has visited every single one of those secondary sites. This entire staff knows that that's the secondary site. So if our students have to evacuate to the secondary site, we will then communicate to parents if it's a parent pickup. We do have a district reunification point. We don't share that publicly in the event of a significant crisis, because what we would not want to do is to have media or other people converge upon that, but we would certainly communicate to our parents about that.
Another question I had, or comment really, is one of the great benefits that we receive from our Blue Line security folks is the relationships with the kids. And the fact that just having those trusted relationships, we hear about things and can put them to bed before they ever actually come to fruition. So that's one great benefit of not just an authority figure police officer in a building, but to deal with a problem, but rather to have that relationship, to get the wind of a potential issue in the minds of a 14 or a 15-year-old and thwart that before it ever becomes a problem. So that's enormously
point.
beneficial.
Agree.
And the third thing I wanted to bring up was, I know I've been asked if we have Alice training, quote unquote, and asked our team and found out that Alice is really a brand of training. We don't have the Alice brand, which I understand is quite costly, but rather we utilize those and more of the security principles, just without the Alice brand of the training on it. But if you'd like to expand any on that, just to answer the question, because I'm asked periodically if we have Alice training or not, and it's not that one is looked down upon because it doesn't have Alice's name on it.
If you sneezed and I handed you, and you said, give me a Kleenex, and I handed you a different brand of tissue, I somewhat use that type of metaphor. It is a name brand. Almost all the FBI recognizes, along with most of the general crisis training, is the run, hide, fight, and that is what Livonia Public Schools the language that we also use. But Alice is a specific company that does their training, and the tenants between the different companies have a thread through them. And it's usually that run, hide, fight options, that is that thread that comes through that is recognized by the FBI.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Burton. Mrs. Bonnefield.
I just want to say thank you very much for doing this. And by sharing this with our parents and caregivers, I think this hopefully puts a spotlight on the fact that our security measures are well thought out, well trained, and well executed. And we know that as parents, when something happens to our kids, whether or not that's a hold in place and we can't walk in and get our kids, there's a bus that's stopped on the side of the road that we're trying to work through a problem with, that hopefully this gives some additional security to families to know that please be patient. We're not doing anything that is undermining the children or putting them in harm's way. We are in fact following our well thought out, reviewed security measures, and that it's as hard as it is as a parent to get through this stuff. Please, a reminder that allow our staff and security personnel to walk through and put these procedures in place for the safety of the kids. And when we have families or caregivers who are uncooperative or trying to thwart what we're trying to do, that it actually puts the kids in more danger than by following our protocols. And again, if it's inconvenient and it's scary and it's time consuming sometimes, but we have to, hopefully this reminds the public that we really, really do put this stuff into action and make sure that we have the protocols and procedures in place in case of any of these events.
Great point.
Yep, Mr.
I'd just
Thank
like to finish off reiterating something that Mrs. Oquist started off saying. All of the things that we've talked about are fantastic, and they are helpful, and they are structural, and they are great, whether they be things with doors, things with windows, all those things. The number one thing we can do, and our staff is amazing at this, is getting to learn who the students are, talking to the students. You mentioned it with Blue Line, our security personnel engaging with the students, everybody, every child having at least one adult who knows something about them, can tell if things are going okay at home or if things are going not okay at home, etc. In the end, it's always going to be the greatest thing that we can do, bottom line.
Thank you, Mr. Francis. And thank you for everybody in your comments, and what a great flip book that is. That just tells a lot of information. So make sure, if you're watching, that you take a look at that flip book and read it. All right, we're going to move on to item 3, Building and Site Committee, and I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Burton.
Thank you. First item on our agenda this evening is 3A, and that is our quarterly dashboard update for quarter 2 of 2024. And Mr. Francis will be with us momentarily, I'm sure.
And some other guests. We have some special guests here tonight. Come on up, gentlemen.
I brought some muscle with me.
That's awesome. I believe we have Mr. Weber and Colin, correct?
Colin Frank,
Colin
yes.
Frank.
Colin
Thank you.
Frank. Thank you, Colin.
Ms. O'Quist, you can add one more to the flip book. I checked it off as I was sitting. Yes.
Were you
So
following along?
I
Mr.
was,
Weber? Thank
yes.
you.
Did you have to wear that jacket today?
The running joke is Mr. Frank and I like to dress in the same clothes once in a while, and I'm glad he wore a gray one today. I'm not, but Phil, I did chat.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having us. Colin's passing out both the dashboard, and then the second part of the presentation is a sinking fund look ahead, which is the other sheet.
Yeah,
So
you're getting A and you're getting B at the same time, but we'll take a bite at one one at a time, and it's gonna be, the quarterly dashboard for you. I'm simply gonna turn it over to Mr. Weber. We've been doing this for quite some time now with Plant Moran, for years and years, and, Brian's been with us for a while now, and, I'm just gonna turn it over to him and let him go through the report.
All right, thank you, Mr. Francis.
You're welcome.
So this is our quarterly report, that just a high-level summary, let the community know and the board know some current updates, what's been going on, a look ahead, and then absolutely feel free to ask questions for overarching questions as need be. So the typical format, we have bond program and goals and objectives are top left corner. These are initiatives we established early in the program that we maintain to make sure we're staying on scope and on remaining on the focus that was talked about to start the program. Moving over into the cost summary sheet, chart portion of it, I will not be reading every number, but I'll go through the columns just so everybody understands what the columns are in each category, how they pertain. So column A is the current budget that I noticed I had a last minute tweak and misspelled that, so I will update before we post to the school website, so that's properly spelled. But current budget, we're working with each category. Column B is the current contracts and purchase orders. So this is anything that's been fully signed by the district, issued to vendors and contractors throughout the program. Column C is actuals paid against those contracts and purchase orders. And then the remaining cost to complete is column D. That's just a subtraction between columns B and C. Column E is the forecasted contracts and purchase orders. So these would be future bid packages or any other vendors we need to bring on board in the coming years that is a known. So we like to forecast those. Column F is our unallocated reserve, AKA owner contingency. So you'll see we are sitting on about $2.5 million of a contingency. Those are funds that are not allocated towards anything but for unforeseen conditions as they arise, or if there's separate projects or scopes that arise that we need to capture. We just monitor that for a safety net or to adapt as needed. And just one small note, that was around $2 million the last time I was in front of the board. The good news is we are still, the market as well, and we're still collecting earned interest on the invested funds within the account. So working with Ms. Smith, CFO, and PFM, we monitor our earned interest throughout and conservatively update those dollars that are received. So those are cash, that's cash in hand and nothing forecasted in the future. Lastly, column G is a forecasted over-under, just showing if we have any budgetary problems, and right now we're at 0, so we're still doing all right. Any questions on the first eye chart?
Comments or questions on the quarterly dashboard? No? Nope, okay. Just an itch, not a question.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Aside from that, cash flow finances, just, this is our, below that is essentially the bank account, how much money's left, how much have we spent. So starting the first column, Series 1, that was sold in 2021. All those funds have been spent. That has been closed out by the district and the finance team. So we're currently working within the funds sold in Series 2, which was 2023. Working down to the math at the bottom, there's about $32.4 million still in the account, which is well within our cash flow. We're fine. We'd like to monitor, obviously, don't go sign on to projects and commit contracts if we don't have the dollars available at the time, which would then roll into the Series 3, which is the spring of 2025. We'll be going out for the remainder of the bond for approximately $38 million. And obviously, issue new bid packs and contracts against that once the money's available.
Any other questions?
All righty.
Mrs. Frank?
Just with the early childhood center, I know it's open and it's ready, but are there still, I know we're just still doing punch lists, but they're not still like expenses that are coming in. Is that true? Like everything that's there is there in terms of expenses, or no, is there still things?
The expenses
kind of
are,
flowing in
they're
and
still
out?
minor, so we're working with Clark Construction, there's still
Yeah.
final change orders rolling through.
Okay.
It's very minor details, we work with Clark on a regular basis to make sure that there's no unforeseens. They've issued documents throughout to all the contractors saying, this is what we think your contract is, let us know if we're missing any change orders. That was done months ago.
Okay.
So it's just miscellaneous administrative final
Yeah.
change orders to close the project out, which they've been working on.
Okay.
And then punch list, yes, teams have been in the building working on those punch list items.
Okay.
There's still some remains, but we're tracking materials, anything they're waiting on to wrap that up sooner than later.
Okay.
And then while we're talking about, obviously, there is a contractor still on site for the playground. If you may have noticed, their crew got back on site mid to late last week. They've informed the district that they plan to remain on site until the project is complete, so it is good news that we have activity again at the playground. Once that's done, obviously we'll restore landscaping, put the fencing back together, and that is the majority work and finalize the project for good.
Ms. Roberts, do we have a rough time frame on what they're looking at for completion of that playground?
We have asked them to be wrapped up by the end of the month, September.
Okay.
There was not a immediate agreement to that, but they understand the urgency to get the project done, so we'll be tracking it for the next few weeks to
Okay,
assist them and help them get them out of there as soon as we can.
sounds
We're
great.
tracking it very, very, very closely.
I got that impression that that was a high priority, so.
Yes.
And I'm sure it is to our little kiddos too,
Yep.
It
so.
is, and they've been
It's-
wonderful using the gross motor room and some of the other spaces, but no doubt they are missing that, and we
Yep.
want to acknowledge for parents who have expressed concern or frustration with that we understand it. We don't want to step away from that. That's our responsibility to make sure that that gets done. While we knew it would not be there for day one, we did know that, we did anticipate it by this point in time. So, I certainly appreciate, Brian has been very dogged on this issue.
Excellent.
And continues to monitor that closely. We are happy to see the progress, and definitely we've seen some progress over the past few days.
Correct.
And so we anticipate that that will get the ball rolling, and by the time we have our ribbon cutting, we are pretty near done.
Yes.
Excellent. Alrighty, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions, or concerns, comments? Alrighty.
I'll do a real quick run through on a couple of the other activities going on in the district and
That's great.
we'll make it. So 2024 summer renovations, for those who've been in buildings. We did kick off the summer early to get in the library's kitchens. So aside from Stevenson's kitchen, which was a known issue that we couldn't get in before the summer ended, so that started first day of summer knowing it would take longer. They are still wrapping up the Stevenson kitchen, forecasted to be done at the end of September, turn it over to LPS in October to have full service back into the Stevenson cafeteria. But other schools, the kitchens are now open. A lot of those actually did complete sooner than scheduled. Just based on logistics, we had to decide whether we could get into the building before summer started to roll that over and open it in the fall. For example, Roosevelt in Hoover, we weren't able to do that. Forecasted that we would roll into the fall. The construction team actually finished both of those during the window of the summer, so they got those done ahead of schedule, which is good to see. So
Excellent.
a lot of good work happened this summer. LMCs came through, and you'll see some pictures. Amy from French, so I don't want to steal her thunder, but it's quite impressive to see that some of the work that occurred in the summer there. So, yep. So right now, we do have a punch list for summer of 2024 work. The team's working on that as well. But overall, it's a very successful summer for these buildings.
And as we normally do, so punch list, there's two versions of a punch list, if you will. So the French, like the architects will go through the designer, the architect, they walk the space, they know what was supposed to be there, they take a look, they say, no, that's not the right item, they mark that down, or something is not installed correctly, or something is not to design, they mark that down. Separately, I create a punch list for the buildings. So I have a form that goes out to each of the principals share it with whomever in the building has, in this bond, the media specialist obviously has that. Any other folks who have some work done in their space, they can share that with them. And then from the lens of the teacher in that room or the principal in that office or whatever the case may be, then they have a form that they can fill out as a punch list. And sometimes they put something on there that isn't bond related. We tell them, if you just put it on there. We'll figure out if it's an LPS maintenance work order, we'll send somebody out. But most of the time, they know where it's been touched, and they'll say, this is missing, or this is a concern, et cetera, et cetera. So there's two different rolling punch lists, the official, quote unquote, official one by the architectural firm, and then also the additional that comes from the buildings. So we run those both ways.
May I make one more quick point?
Absolutely.
Mrs. Burton, I just want to acknowledge the gentleman sitting at this table and also Mr. Green sitting behind us, because while we talked for a moment about the playground being delayed, we opened our early childhood center on time, on budget, which was a huge lift. And
Yeah.
each one of you were extremely instrumental in making sure that that happened. I don't know if there was a day that went by in the past several months. It was, about a 14-month project from groundbreaking when you first put the shovels in as our Board of Education, to opening, and the amount of things that needed to be completed in order to get to that point. And you walked it a few times during that process. And I will just say how proud we are and how thankful we are for the efforts that were made to get us to that point. From, every patch of cement to every steel beam, to every inspection at the very end that needed to be checked off. I don't know that anyone would ever realize how much behind the scenes went into making sure that our school opened on August 26th. There were a lot of things that could have delayed it, and there were people here that would not let that happen, so I appreciate it.
And for those who may not have seen it yet, it is magnificent.
It
is
is.
absolutely beautiful. Many of us have been out at open houses throughout the whole district. I was stopped by somebody at an open house to tell me that their younger child is at the Early Childhood Center and how
Yes.
much they love it and how much their little one loves it, and
Yes.
they could not have raved any more than they were doing. So it's nice to see that
It
it's,
is.
that we love it and appreciate everything that it took to get it there, and that our community members and our staff and our families really appreciate it. So
Yes,
it's exciting
absolutely.
to see something that shiny and brand new coming in.
It is. It's great.
Debbie Downer's about to talk. Sorry. I just want to make sure that, and Brian and I talked about this earlier, we want to just bring it out, say it to, what it is. The air conditioning, we continue to struggle with air conditioning in places. It is something that I feel horrible for classrooms that don't have it working properly. This is a project that we started, obviously, at the beginning of the bond. And at this point, when I try to explain to a teacher who emails me, and I don't begrudge anybody that emails me saying, it's 85 degrees every day, and it's tough in here when I have a classroom full of kids. We have so many people working on this. It is incredibly frustrating for us. We have essentially two overarching issues. One, air conditioning that works but leaks. And we have another that is air conditioning doesn't cool. It's not actually working properly, whether it doesn't turn out at all or simply runs but doesn't cool. We've had multiple groups out there. Clark Construction is part of it. LPS team is part of it. We've got the controls folks involved in this. We've got Conti as the mechanical contractor as part of this. Plant Moran Realport, Brian's been bird dogging this constantly. We have weekly meetings.
Yeah.
We have the manufacturers involved. We have so many people involved that we just wanted to let anybody who's listening, any parent who may have gone to an open house whose teacher's classroom was warm and they said, yes, it's been like this for a long time. We know we have a running list. We update that list. It's a live Excel document that all those folks who have a hand in it can see when they check something off and say, this is what we're doing to it. They make notes. We are taking it very seriously. We are frustrated. I get it. And me sitting here talking about how I understand and I wish it was better means nothing to the people sitting in that room all day long. I completely understand that as well. But we just want to call out what is going on and say, we're owning it. We're searching. We're brainstorming. We're trying different things to make a solution, because it's not a single item that when you say, aha, eureka, I can now put this across everything. That's not necessarily the case. We actually have a few different items. Is there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah,
About
just
how
the-
many rooms are we talking about at this point? Could we put it in context?
It's in flux. We have, for the leaking units, we're hovering around 25 to 30 right now. It peaked as much. And there's a lot of nuances and variables of, we get reports of a room may be leaking, which we asked for anything and everything to come in. We've cataloged it just to make sure we can see it. Some of it is an instance where it was previously completed. The ceiling tile might still be stained, or something wasn't fully repaired, which is a good thing and an easy fix, so we can check those off the list. It's the ones that we had to fix. We had multiple issues beyond what we had now. We implemented a fix last fall and over the summer, before the summer. That fixed a good portion of it, but as Mr. Francis said, that wasn't the fix-all that we were hoping it was gonna be for all. So now it's getting the team back in there and understanding the variables, anything from duct size, distances from point A to point B, the air flows and all that. It's all a team effort to understand what the variables are and why didn't that first thing fix it? Okay, what's our next step? And that's where we've been in rooms multiple times to understand that if these didn't work, what's our next one, and continue to work at these. So just repeating what Mr. Friend said, it's not as if we knew it was one fix to a problem and nobody's been in the buildings. It's been multiple visits, multiple ways to look at it, multiple groups to see how we can get the next step and solution.
There are units that are still in the diagnostic phase.
Yeah. And then to fully answer, there's also the non-cooling portion of it. That peaked over 100 classrooms at one point, but there's been techs in it. The variable play there is when we kicked off the summer naturally, it was a high 80s, 90s day, full classroom, and those systems react differently than in a summertime when there's no kids in it or a heat load in it. They were being pushed to their limits and they reacted differently. So we had a lot of issues to kick the first week off, unfortunately. So since then, we've had multiple people on the roof looking at these units to understand why they are resetting themselves.
Are some of those back on?
Yes, and some of those are back on.
We've got
Great assistance
some
from.
whole buildings
yes.
that are pretty much good to go, and other
Yeah.
buildings that have
Yes. So
multiple.
there is progress. It's not as if we were a stagnant standstill. We can't figure anything out. It's just been slower than we anticipated to get these fixes in place. That there is progress being made. There's crews in the district tonight as we speak, working on stuff, and they'll continue in the week until we can keep chipping away at it. But it's just slower progress than we had hoped.
Mrs. Acosta and then Mrs. Bonnefield?
And my original question was going to be prioritizing those that have no cooling
Absolutely, yeah.
working.
Yeah.
But also, are there alternatives that we're providing for these classrooms so that we're addressing the issue one way or another?
Yeah, so when possible, I've talked to principals, and I've communicated with teachers who, when there's space, they've been offered to move. Some teachers have said, and I understand their reasoning, moving is more hassle than being in the hot room. I'd rather just stay in the hot room because that's where all my lab stuff is, et cetera, or I've got, little kids, I can't, whatever the case may be, when that's offered, when it's available, it's being offered. It isn't available everywhere. Some schools, as we know, are fuller than others, and classrooms are being used, but even when there is space for their own reasons that are legitimate, some staff will say, I'm not going to move because of just the flow of what I'm doing in my classroom.
Mrs.
Thank you.
Bonnefield?
I have to say, even though we're running into issues, you guys have done an amazing job with this air conditioning. I think anybody that's spent a number of days, hours, or years in any commercial building, even on a new build, to balance an air conditioning unit in a brand new building that's been designed specifically for that purpose. The air conditioning has been designed specifically for that building. It has all the new tech. Those are still really difficult. Rooms are hot, rooms are cold. It's really hard to balance that stuff. And I think we need to remember that we're retrofitting buildings that are over 60 years old and trying to fit pretty much a square peg in a round hole to accommodate this. So it's a big deal to be able to get the air conditioning in there, but it's also on a good day, it's a tricky thing to do. So keep working on it. You guys are doing great. I'm sure everybody appreciates the fact that there's air conditioning. We haven't had air conditioning in the past. This is a new thing, and I know it's tough because we all expect things just to jump up and start working, but keep plugging away, and you guys are doing a great job and staying on top of it and doing everything that you can to get it to work, and you're not going to give up until it's all up and running. So thank you very much for everything that you're doing.
Thank you.
Mrs. Bradford?
Thank you. And to piggyback off Mrs. Acosta, is the district providing any fans, or what are we not doing that? How are we doing for those classrooms that are getting heated?
I can't answer that on a room by room and building by basis, but I know that the principals I've talked to have said, I've done, whatever I can for folks. So but if I've not gotten a request for a
anything.
fan,
Okay.
if somebody asked for it, we would, if we have them, we would send them. But I think the principals are trying to work with their folks at that level.
Okay.
Yeah, we certainly,
Thank you.
those kind of things I've seen throughout our schools, absolutely. I think the other thing that, you know, in addition to what Mr. Francis talked about, for those rooms where we know it's going to be a next summer solution, we put in, what would you call the window units, the,
Yeah,
Oh,
we call them
okay.
window shakers, but they're the window units, yeah.
Okay.
yeah,
We
and
found
so
those
in a
couple
few
places.
extreme cases where we
Okay.
know it is not something we could solve, or it was something that was going to wait till the summer, we've put in those individual window units. That really isn't feasible to put into 60 or 70 classrooms. You know, thankfully, the overwhelming majority of our 900-plus classrooms are working properly. For the ones that aren't, we do have some solutions. It's a little easier at an elementary level where you can do some movement breaks in other places, where you can ensure some outdoor time if that's appropriate. It looks a little bit different at the different levels as far
Yes.
as what we can do. And we have certainly communicated all of that to principals, and our principals know it, but we've communicated what to do from those days when we did not have air in any of our rooms.
Correct.
And so all of those pieces, whether it's keeping the lights low, ensuring water breaks, ensuring that we have, you know, outdoor break time, going into utilizing the media center and other cooled spaces, those are things that we've communicated out to principals as far as options. At the high schools, as Mr. Francis said, where they have those front rooms, for instance, Stevenson has that front room, so does Franklin. Churchill has, I believe it's called the collaboration room, and they have some of those extra spaces. So classes have taken breaks down there and had some of their coursework completed or some of their work down in those areas. And so wherever we can, we've tried to work in those options.
Thank you.
Sure.
My last question, what should a staff member do? They probably already know this, but in case anyone does not. If they find themselves in a situation, they're in a room with a problem, what should they be doing? And the reason I'm asking is I had one staff member say that they put in a request for a work order last spring. It isn't fixed, but we talked about the fact that that doesn't mean that there's not work being done on it, but they didn't know if they were still on the list or not. So if someone's unaware just legitimately doesn't know if they're still on the list to be worked on or not, what should their step be?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, and the answer is, and I've sent this out to the principals, asked the principals to share it with their staff, that the general way to work through a work order, whether it be for, well, we'll just stick to maintenance, I'm not gonna get in IT. And if you have an issue with your unit or anything, you contact your building supervisor. Copy the principal, so the principal is aware that something's going on, especially if it's the air conditioning right now. I want them to be aware also. If the building supervisor, who can do some things with the AC, if we're talking specific AC, obviously they have other things they can do with other, you know, issues in a classroom. But if it's AC and the building supervisor says, you know, obviously that's leaking, it's cooling, but it's leaking, that's not something they can do, or it's not working and they've tried to reset it, which they have some capabilities, like I said, it's still not running properly, they would then put in a work order. We get that, our team looks and says, this is either an LPS issue or this is going to the bond team. Now, having said all that, we've got many on the list, we've crossed them off when they're done, we've got that, like I said, running live list. I still continue to have someone that would email me directly and say, hey, I was advised just to tell you this, you know, we've done some things here in the building, I've asked the right people, but I just wanted you to know, Phil. And I've looked and that room wasn't on the list, and we get it on the list. So, you know, we want to run through the regular channels, but I've gotten, in the last 2 weeks, really only, I could count on one hand, the people who have directly emailed me something, because we had that big, you know, push when the first couple weeks of school to get that list built. But, you know, as recently as today, somebody said this room at this building, and we looked and said, nope, we're putting it on there. Thank you for letting us know. I apologize for what's going on, and we've got you now. So that's pretty much what they should do. The normal route through their building supervisor and copying the principal. But I'm not going to delete your email just because you emailed me and said, hey, room 3 over here is not working.
All right, so if they're unsure or if it's a new problem, if they're at all unsure of whether or not they're on the list, email their building supervisor and their principal.
That's always the first, yeah, building super's the first person.
All righty, thank you. Any other comments or questions?
I just have one more item for look ahead.
Go ahead.
And we'll be done. So looking ahead to 2025 and once again, not to steal Amy's thunder, she'll be here from French at the table in a minute. We are currently at a 95% construction drawing set that's been issued to Clark Construction, the team. They're already looking through buildings, walking the buildings to make sure their scope and anything abnormalities or anything like that they can question now. We'll get all those questions in during the due diligence process, get that back to Amy and her team at French to make sure drawings are cleaned up in preparation for that. That's going to go live for bidding in October, and then you'll see us in November with recommendations for contractors for 2025. So that's currently ongoing for 2025. And then from a cost standpoint, right now we have an estimate of $12.7 million from Clark Construction's estimating team. That's within our budget. We're sitting well right now from a cost standpoint for that forthcoming work. Obviously, it'll depend on what our bids come in at, but right now we're off to a good start from our initial estimate to where we were from a budget standpoint.
And as you'll see when Amy comes up here, summer 25 is 4 buildings. We've been doing 5 buildings each of the last 3 summers, and coming in 25, we'll be looking at 4 buildings.
That'll be a nice change to workflow. Any other comments or questions on this? All righty. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And we are going to move on to the review of the sinking fund program.
All right. So I'll give a quick summary. In front of you of the next 3 years. I'll give a summary of kind of some of the big projects this summer. We did $4.5 million in roofing at Franklin and Cleveland. Those projects went really, really well.
Was that the rest of Franklin we're done at Franklin with roof, or is there still a portion of that roof?
No, I think there's still a portion.
There's still a
left,
portion, okay.
yes.
Just wanted to get everybody on the same page, thank
We
you.
mainly focused on classroom areas, the lower roofs that were critical, and then we'll strategically attack the higher roofs and other portions of the building, but we couldn't tackle all one summer, just the size of the scope.
Yeah, too much roof to do in one summer. We did have returned contingency and unused allowances of $378,000. So, like I said, projects went really, really well. So, paving projects, we started that back up again. We did central office phase 1. I'll talk a little bit more about how we're breaking up central office in the future. But we did $891,000 worth of paving. And same thing, we had unused allowances and contingency that was returned in the amount of $240,000. So big projects went really, really well. We're able to not use all the allowances and contingencies, and summer went really well. Looking ahead to the future, summarizing the roofing, 2025, we're looking at Churchill High School, Webster Elementary, the administration building, and the warehouse at central office. And then 26, we are looking at Cooper, Hoover, and Garfield. And then 27, Coolidge, Roosevelt, Stevenson, phase 2. We meet with the facilities team very often with this, so they can be adjusted as needed, but this is the plan going forward with the roofing. So paving, we have Franklin. Part of that, we are actually walking in the future to determine exactly how much of that we're going to end up doing. Central office phase 2. Breaking that up into multiple phases just for logistics, because this is a year-round used building. There's a lot of traffic that goes through here. Then in 26, we're looking at elementary schools, middle schools. We did have a survey done by NTH of all of the buildings in the district. So we look back at it, evaluate as needed, go check, and then pick as we need.
If I could jump in real quick,
Yep.
that's similar to what we've been doing over the last several years with roofs, using that, coming back to it year by year, and then saying, yeah, but this is different now, this happened there, so we need to jump that one in front because it's now worse than it was a few years ago. So same idea.
Yep. And then Stevenson, partial again, and central office phase 3 in 26. Kind of same thing in 27. Churchill partial, central office phase 4, and elementary school, middle school to be determined as well. Moving on to athletics projects. The administration team is meeting with the ADs to determine the needs, so it's a to be determined right now, but we do have some funds set aside for future athletic projects. We've discussed a number of them, but we have not determined exactly what we're going to move forward with yet. So that's 2026 and 2027 as well. Capital projects, looking at the pool filtration systems, those are a need. We're going to balance it out so that the district always has a pool that's available. during these renovations. So that's 25 and 26. 25, we're also going to look at replacing the monument signs, video boards at the high schools and LCTC. And then also in 27, we are looking at the Churchill water main.
I gotta jump in real quick. He mentioned pool filter rooms. This is backup house. I should have mentioned during my update, if you haven't been in a pool room yet in high school, there's been some major upgrades aesthetically to those pool rooms, and they're pretty fantastic.
Yeah,
So,
beautiful.
just to clarify, this is backup house, mechanical filtration systems, as opposed to the aesthetics that were upgraded upon this past summer.
So I will just jump on what Colin mentioned with regard to the athletic projects. We have had a lot of ongoing discussion. You will certainly be part of that, so I want you to know that. We just have a lot more work than we have funding. So we have, the needs are, continue to be there, even though we've invested a great deal. The other thing is we've seen costs just grow exponentially. So what it may have been for a tennis court when we started was extremely different from when we ended. Same thing with turf fields, et cetera. So where we anticipated a certain cadence of continuing that work, we really do have to reevaluate because the costs have really skyrocketed. And you know, Colin is not only working in our district, but in other districts. He has a feel for what those costs are, and I think our estimates that we have are pretty clear. And so we need to make some decisions over the next several months, and so we'll certainly be involving you in a lot of that. We will absolutely be working with Mr. Etu, the 3 ADs, our 3 high school principals, as well as our bond team, along with Plant Moran, Real Point. But again, I think we need to really reevaluate where we are utilizing the sinking fund dollars. While we're grateful for it, it only goes so far when the costs have increased so substantially. So we'll make some determinations for the next couple of years, and then we may have to fold some of these pieces into a future bond. So we'll continue to discuss that, but as you know, we've made some outstanding investments in our athletic facilities. That certainly shows there is always more to do, and pretty soon we'll be back to where we started and needing to redo when we talk about the fields and the tracks and so on. And you know, it's amazing to think how quickly that has gone. So that is might feel a bit of a nebulous line, but no, we will absolutely be bringing that back to you in study sessions and committee of the whole.
Mrs. Jarvis.
Thank you. Just for our community, I was wondering if you would review the very specific things that a sinking fund is allowed to be used on and how that would contrast with, for example, the Wayne County millage and what we can do with that.
Sure.
I can touch base. So there is a document, and it is provided from Livonia's council of exactly what is legal and not, and there's plenty that I won't be able to touch in the meeting here. But the main thing is we cannot do maintenance and repairs as part of the sinking fund. We can't pay for salaries. There is some certain equipment you can buy with it. You can do IT refreshes, which are new as in the last 4 to 5 years. So we mainly focus on these capital programs that is an improvement or a roof or a parking lot, but try to stay away anything that may blur the line of a repair or maintenance item that would not fall under this category.
Any other comments or questions on this?
So I don't want to lose an important thing that Colin shared with us. You said $378,000 return contingency on the roofing
Yes.
and over $200,000 return contingency on the paving. Is that correct?
Exactly.
So we're over $500,000 on returned contingency, which is significant because in a time when the costs for both roofing and paving continue to rise, the fact that our estimates and then our work came under budget is certainly something to be very proud of.
Any other comments or questions? No? Alrighty, thank you very much for these updates. They're always, it's always good to kind of get a grasp again, and I love that they're quarterly. We can kind of keep our fingers on exactly what's happening and where we're going from there. So thank you for all of your work.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Alrighty, the next item on our agenda is item 3C, 2025 Design Development and Budget Presentation. And Mr. Francis. turn it back over to you. Welcome, Amy.
Thanks, everyone, for having me.
Yep, Amy is from French Associates. You've seen her the last few years, and we need to get our presentation up on, oh, there, look at that.
That was like
Nothing
magic.
ever works when I ask for it.
Wait, say air conditioning.
Yeah, yes, uh-huh.
Too soon.
Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
Where were we? Amy's got a two-pronged item. We're gonna talk 2024, and then we're gonna talk 2025. The presentation she has, you have in front of you, it's on the screens as well. And I believe we're gonna start with our like before and afters from 2024, right? And then you're gonna move into some of the planning for 2025, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, I will, do you wanna run it since you're gonna be the
Yeah.
one? Okay. I'll
Just
give
the,
it to you.
the
Right
arrow?
off, yep.
Perfect. All right, well, I only printed out the diagrams for the 25 work because pictures are better on screen. Okay. So this is for the 24 work that was just completed. Each building will show you the LMC, the flex space, and the kitchens. So this is Hayes. This is the new entry space. We can see that pop of the new carpet and the colors. Brought
Love
it
the
into,
carpet.
yes. And then the Idea Factory, there were kids in the classroom at the time of the pictures, but you can see that now we have that little pop of intrigue into that Idea Factory, kind of pulling that piece through all the buildings, the elementary, as we do the circles or the kind of angled windows. The flex space, that's where we have the nano wall, so that opens into a flexible classroom that kind of fit into a little nook inside of Hayes's LMC. And if you haven't been to Hayes's LMC, it was a bit of a challenge to get that in there because we have the clear story window. So if you ever walk in there, you'll see we kind of angled back the top of that to still allow that natural light to come
Yeah, it
through.
came out really nicely though.
I don't know, clicker. Am I too far?
Maybe too far.
Okay. And then the kitchen, this used to be in just a little storage room, and we completely relocated the kitchen to the side of the gymnasium and took up a more linear space so that they could have a full serving line within the confines of the kitchen rather than having it outside like they had previously set up into the gymnasium.
Yeah, this was thus far to me the biggest. When we first started, Kennedy was I think the biggest transformation. This has changed my mind on that because if you're ever familiar with the Hayes setup back there in the kitchen next to the building supervisor's office and receiving and all that, this is a game changer.
It was a real challenge with all the piping. If you ever go in there, you'll see all the piping for the whole building is in the back area. So it was a real challenge working around that, but it turned out really well. We'll move on to Hoover, which is the sister school to Kennedy. So you've seen Kennedy in the past. The big change here was we lowered the windows. The LMC specialist said, I've got this beautiful garden. Let's feature it. So we put those windows in. I'll say, gosh, I would love to just sit in there. So it really brings, the nature into the space with other elements as well. The Idea Factory for this space ended up being a classroom due to space constraints, but nonetheless, it still holds the same elements as the rest of the Idea Factory. So it's got, the unique ceiling features, the pops of color, all the furniture is still the same functional furniture, and we added some windows to the corridor to invite the kids to be intrigued on what's going on. The flex space, very similar to Kennedy, went into the old computer lab. The window, instead of having those windows, it just is a glass wall that opens right up to that space and allows them to branch out when needed. And then the kitchen, similar to Kennedy, it was a very tight space, but we were able to gain some space through the corridor and get them all the elements that they needed to be functional. This is Roosevelt. This one it was very hard to work with because of the narrowness of it, but we really wanted to make it feel bigger than it was. If you look at Coolidge, it was a lot wider. This one was narrow, but we think with the elements in the ceiling, the floor, the furniture, it ends up to make it feel like very cohesive.
Yeah, the
Moving the-
starburst design is
Yeah.
fantastic.
That's
Moving the
really
glass,
It's like
Yeah.
sun and clouds.
yeah, getting the glass on that back wall to the outside, and having that sun feature, it just,
That
And
sun
the
feature on the
windows in
ceiling is
between.
amazing.
it's such a nice look. It really came out nicely.
Yeah, adding those windows along, just anything that can bring nature into spaces too, the connection, helps students, I think, engage better. The Idea Factory was in the old computer lab in that space. Same elements though. It really, there's a window that is into the LMC that brings you into this space, which has the angular features, so everything is tied back to each other. And then the flex space was in the old workroom, so to the other side of the LMC, and those doors just open right up to more flexible furniture space.
And we found them a workroom on the other side of that? I'm trying to
Yeah, it's
remember,
on
right?
the back side in an old office area. A lot of these buildings didn't need as big of workrooms anymore. And then the kitchen, this was a sunken kitchen, so we brought everything up to the same level for functionality purposes. Everything's on casters. You've got the walk-in cooler right in that space, so everything is for ease of operation. Homes, a lot of people are really thrilled about this one. We hear a lot. This one had a lot of undertakings for a square space. It, makes it challenging. You think square, oh, that's easy, but it makes things a little harder to separate, especially with our flexible furniture. But we delineated by different ceilings for the different spaces. And
This LMC is entirely inside the building as well, so it doesn't have any outer walls.
yes.
Or light, or natural light.
Yeah, hence, yeah, we couldn't cut into, we could cut into things, but it wasn't getting you very far.
But the way that you designed that entryway, it feels like a completely different,
Doesn't it?
welcoming space.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like the colors on this one, when you put them all together with the furniture, and when it was in a vacuum and being done, it was a lot of greens, and then suddenly the furniture arrived, and it all started to tie together.
And the Idea Factory, I think part of, without having windows in the space, by adding these larger windows, the Idea Factory and the flex space, that did help, bring some more light into that space. So we use the angular windows for the Idea Factory, and then for the flex space, that collapsible wall. And that bleeds right into the space. And you can see the carpet from the old one, wasn't that old of carpet, but it shows that we pulled the theme into the building. We're still sticking with their green theme. And the kitchen, it was really a refresh, sprucing that space up. Functionality, it was good. It just, equipment was dated, and, needed to be updated. So we were able to keep most of the serving line intact, because that was newer, and then other pieces got renovated as needed. So we really just brought it up to the same par as the rest of the kitchens.
It's crisp now, you go in there, and it's a crisp look, and it's just, you got that.
Got rid of
updated
any
feel.
curbs or recesses, so you can move things around a lot easier. A lot of things got casters. And then Stevenson High School, which is the sister school to Franklin that we did last year. This space was also a bit of a challenge. It's such a big space. How do you, separate it into nooks and crannies? So we have two photos here. This is of the flexible furniture. And then the next slide is showing you where they can have a classroom set up. So this is, they have a screen that they can set up and break out into groups. So you still have those delineations between spaces, but still flexible.
And each of those tables can seat 6 students, and then there is a screen right there, so they can be working on a project or a presentation. They have their own screen at that collaboration area, and so a teacher can have a class in there, another teacher can have a class in the flex area, the media specialist can be working with students in the center. It's a really well thought out space for utilization by either small groups of students or entire classes that can be broken out into a group.
And then
Yes, Mrs. Frank.
So as I'm looking at this and just all of the interesting ways that we're doing this flex space and doing things, So I know that we rent out like our gyms and stuff. Would we ever consider renting out like our LMs? I mean, I just think, wow, for companies who don't have spaces, or is that something we don't even want to get into because they're brand new and we never
Right.
would want to do that? I don't know. I was just.
It's a great question. I don't know that we've ever thought about the media centers. We do have some limited areas like the gyms. We've generally stayed away from, for instance, rental of our fields, because the cost to replace them are so significant, so we don't want to accelerate the need to replace them. I think we feel similarly about the media spaces. Oh goodness, I'm getting quite the side look from Mr. Francis. I think I could answer it for him. But I also think that we are very fastidious about food and drink, what goes into those spaces. And so knowing that we have control, so to speak, in how they're utilized, I would think we would want to leave it to that. But I do know we take opportunities like, for instance, our Vision Forward team and so on, to utilize those spaces so we can have the community in to see them, and to hold PTA meetings and booster club meetings and band club meetings and things like that, so that our community can come in, but in a more controlled way. Do you want to add anything?
No, that's fabulous. I was excited. I was very interested to see how we were going into that one. Yeah. No, I've gone to PTA meetings in the media centers, et cetera, and I could see the foundation having them, if they wanted to go on a little bit of a road show, they could have some meetings there, et cetera, and that's a very, it's a great way for folks to see it, to enjoy it, to use it. What we've learned is outside groups don't give enough loving to our spaces like we do.
Any other questions on the 24 projects?
No, looks fabulous. Alrighty.
Thank you.
And
go forward.
we're having board meetings throughout the school year, those study sessions at some of these places, so it'd be fun to get in there and see.
Yeah, amazing job, Amy. Really amazing job with your creativity and your knowledge of the spaces. And some of those kitchen areas really were a puzzle, in addition to, of course, the media centers. But some of those kitchen areas really took some time and creativity and working with the schools to capture some spaces that needed to be replaced in other spaces. So really great job with the design.
And we always have a great time working with the staff. Everybody provides good feedback. I think it ends up being a very collaborative, team. And you'll see that on Buchanan when we start through there. I just met with Jen, this principal, and we've made some changes, but, earlier on is better, right? Because we're not done yet. But we like to hear that feedback early on and kind of work together.
We have this for up here, right?
Yes, yep.
Okay, so we'll have the next
It's in the same
presentation?
presentation.
Oh, it's in the same one?
Yep.
Okay, we'll go right back to, there you go.
Just put a check mark there. Oh, there we go.
There you go.
So we're gonna go into the 425 projects. We've got Buchanan, Grant, Johnson, and Churchill. So we'll start with Buchanan, similar to the previous years. This is the overall plan highlighting the areas that we're going to touch in the building. So the green is the kitchen, the LMC is the blues, and that with including the Idea Factory. We've got a little bit of additional work for the orange is the epoxy flooring. Door replacement is anything the purplish color, and then some schools have grind and polishing, and this building does too of the terrazzo.
Yeah. This is a fun one because of the way that by fun I mean an interesting little puzzle for Amy and her team, because the way the kitchen and the gymnasium kind of play together and the shapes of these spaces, it's not a rectangle next to a rectangle type of thing, and the kitchen is tight in its own way over there, and there's a lot of doors and a lot of spaces at Buchanan. So I think that the principal has a really nice vision of some of the thoughts on it, and you guys were working together. I saw some of the information that you guys talked about as recently as today. And the LMC is another space that's on the fully the interior of a building, and I'd like where you and your team are going with it. It looks really, I think it's going to be pretty fun.
I think almost all of our LMCs are landlocked this year.
Yeah.
So in that flex space, I'm picturing that, so that's taking over the current office
Workroom, there's like a workroom, office, and like a ESL room, I think. So there's quite a few spaces that are in there.
Okay, so that's captured in that blue flex space, and then working into the media center, and then into the book area.
Yes,
Correct?
yes.
Okay.
So if you want to flip the
And
page,
the Idea Factory is right across.
yeah,
from
in the
it.
dark
So there's not the
dark.
space in
Where
there
the
for.
current Project Lead the Way classroom.
correct, yep.
Okay.
Mhm.
So if we go to the next
Yep,
page.
you know.
We'll touch base really quick on the kitchen. This is one of the things we were talking about with Jen today is, originally this kitchen expanded to take over, what was the egress out of the gymnasium on the lower, southern portion of the green area. And so one challenge was trying to maintain egress out of that kitchen or out of the gymnasium multipurpose space. So we originally had added, a corridor, which is underneath the green storage to the, left, but we've since been able to rework it so we can keep that storage, which is essential for that building function, and we're going to add another pair of corridor doors that are fire rated to section off that space, so that gives them dedicated egress for if there is any fire or safety evacuation. So that was a big challenge we were working with up until the last minute here, so you'll see that in the final design.
So there will no longer be egress on the other side of the multipurpose room?
Correct. Yep, so you have the two north doors that go directly out, and then there'll be one just to the lower left. There's the double doors. That will still be an egress, but we'll have a new pair, triple doors that section off.
Great.
Functionality-wise, kitchen serving remains the same. Okay. Sorry about that. And then looking at the LMC floor plan, as Andrea mentioned, we took over what was their group room, small instruction office, and that's what turned into our flex space. We were limited here with the space, so we had to move the Idea Factory out into that current Project Lead the Way space, but it will be similar to Hoover, where we'll still maintain all the elements of an Idea Factory.
The addition of that restroom at the back. there,
Door.
right?
Yep,
Yeah,
we added a
yeah.
door so that the students could easily go to a restroom. It goes down the corridor, and so if someone needed to use that, because there's not one nearby.
But that was,
Yep.
it's all those types of, utilitarian things that sometimes you think that help actually quite a bit.
Amy, so where, you said that the Project Lead the Way was in that classroom, where is that going now? Or is it staying in that classroom?
It's the.
Along with the
this is
Idea
dark
Factory.
one, right?
Yes.
Is-
Will teach in the
yes,
Idea
in the Idea Factory.
Okay,
And many of them are doing that at the K4, and I think maybe even the 5-6, but it is a great, it utilizes very well for many of them.
I can see all of the items would work well. How does the scheduling work?
That becomes
These are
their
cla-
classroom space. And
Okay.
so it can be utilized in times when they're not teaching, but that would
Okay.
be their classroom space. So the
Okay.
Project Lead the Way teacher would be teaching in the Idea Factory.
Okay, so if somebody else couldn't utilize the Idea Factory during his or her teaching
Correct.
time,
Yes.
they'd have to work around that.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
when we originally envisioned the Idea Factories in that first year for the designs, and then Project Lead the Way came along as that STEM
Mm-hmm,
learning, and as it is now, the fifth special. We brought some folks together, Bill Green, Teresa O'Brien, got some principals together, folks who are familiar with the Project Lead the Way. We said, what's the point of this space? It was supposed to be for that thinking outside the box, that the learning and the hands-on for students. And we came to the conclusion, that's what we're bringing in here with this new course. They marry together. The purpose of the space is that this means that almost every hour in the day, students would be doing that in that room. So we just basically said, we had an original vision, but sometimes you have to, take that turn when life throws it at you, and it worked out, I think, quite well for how we're gonna utilize. This isn't 100% every building. Some still have an Idea Factory. I can think of Cleveland. that teacher is in a different classroom teaching it, and the media specialist is overseeing that idea factory there, and that's her space where she does certain things and special things with her students when they come in. So it's just a little bit different in each building, the goal being utilization of that space, and that's, generally speaking, that's what's happening now in those buildings. And that's, we were happy with, at least speaking for the group that we talked about this idea, we were happy with the fact that kids are learning and working in them.
Yeah, I love the Project Lead the Way. My only concern is, are we, by doing that, by double dipping in that room, do we have fewer opportunities for kids to use the Idea Factory?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I think the challenge with it is, and just what Mr. Francis said, is that we initially saw that as a place where teachers would go in and do STEM type of learning before we brought in Project Lead the Way. And so we envisioned that whether it was the media specialist may utilize part of their time in there, or a classroom teacher. The reality of it was hard to carve out that time in a teacher's day and also have them create lessons that would be applicable in the STEM type of world. So what we began to discuss was, how can we ensure that those spaces are utilized, because we're investing quite a bit in them. And so where we could have Project Lead the Way fill that piece, we felt was just a perfect marriage. And again, when we first had this idea of the Idea Factories, we did not have Project Lead the Way in place. But now that we have that, that's a great marriage. Where we don't, it really still is incumbent upon the media specialist or individual teachers to, again, utilize that in a way that they see applicable. And I think that is still somewhat of a challenge, to utilize it in a way that goes above and beyond what their normal day-to-day projects may be. We didn't want it simply to be used as another art space. We wanted it to be really utilized as that collaborative, innovative space. And what we found was to either ask media specialists to continuously do that in addition to using the flex space, in addition to doing their stories and their book talks and things like that, was a large ask, although certainly some of them do. Some of them have great ideas to use that space. But we saw less of that happening with classroom teachers, because their curriculum responsibilities are so great. So it really is something we'll continue to utilize and explore in places where it's not Project Lead the Way. Where it is, it's obviously utilized much more. I don't know, Mrs. O'Brien, if you want to add anything more to that. But that really, Mr. Green, we had a lot of conversation around that, and felt that right now Project Lead the Way was the best match. But if
I think you and Mr. Francis did it right.
Yeah.
Target with that description.
Okay, all righty.
does that make sense?
Yep, it does.
Yeah.
It does. Yep, thank you.
Sure.
Yes.
Here you go.
And then this is just one of our preliminary renderings as we work through the space and the design. This space is kind of unique because it's bowling alley-like. It's very long, and then it has a couple different heights in it. So we felt to bring nature into this building, because it's really in a nature setting. That whole space has got a beautiful woods around it. So we brought in these tree acoustical clouds, so they act as acoustics, but they also give that intrigue and give that nature feel to it. So that was just one of our first renderings.
I believe when you sent me the email, the first, just sketch of that, and I looked at it and I wrote back, are you trying to make it look like a tree? Because
does.
if so, that's what it looks like. And
Yeah.
that's what I was doing. It's like, okay, at least I figured it out.
And they're a pre-made canopy piece, so it's not, anything too complicated that they just hang. So.
Yeah.
It's like giant connect.
Looks neat.
Grant is our next building. It's our second elementary school. So this space, we do have an alternate for. The yellow one, we've got two landlocked spaces in the middle of the building that a lot of teachers don't enjoy teaching in as much because they don't have any windows. So one of the alternates we have is to add some fire-rated windows to the corridor, or some type of natural lighting into those spaces. Similar to the other buildings, we have the door replacement. This building has quite a bit more door replacement because they're a lot older. and hardware. And then the epoxy flooring, and this one kind of has a mishmash as well of epoxy flooring and grinding and polishing the terrazzo flooring. Go to the kitchen. So this kitchen right now,
Did I go too far? No, it's not moving. I think we're off.
oh, back one. It's a little delay. So the kitchen space is gonna remain in the existing kitchen.
Nope.
Nope, that's too far. Yeah, you might have to get closer. There you go. So you'll see that on the left is the existing floor plan. The footprint for the actual kitchen remains the same, but what we're doing is we're taking over the old office for the building supervisor. He's got a new plan, you'll see that. He gets an actual official office near the LMC. So that is utilized for the kitchen walk-in cooler and freezer. So that helps them get anything, I don't know if you've been in this building when they're serving, but everything's in the corridor right now, so we're making it more functional, so they don't have to set everything down that corridor and their pinch point.
That'd be a big, big improvement.
The LMC space for this is also separated from the Idea Factory as well. I believe that current room is their Project Lead the Way, that we're gonna take a classroom over in the upper left. And then what we utilized in this building was we had an old computer lab where the darker blue is. We've turned that into the building supervisor's office, a workroom for the building, and then a resource room. So they were able to get all those spaces that they needed in the building out of that one existing computer lab. And then we turned the flex space, which is the current workroom, was kind of landlocked. We turned that into the flex space, so that allowed the new workroom to go on the corridor for more flexibility for staff to use it. And then the tech room remained where it was at. We added a toilet room for convenience, since there aren't really any toilet rooms in this little new wing here, and the LMC workroom. The office space was set inward into the arc of the LMC to provide the best visibility to even the flex space, to the books, to the reading corner. And then this is just a view showing that new LMC office, how it kind of pops out into the space. That gives her the best visibility. And this one, we will be doing an official rendering at the next board meeting, so you'll get to see that walkthrough.
Okay, good.
Johnson is our upper elementary school for this phase. Another landlocked LMC right in the smack middle of the building. And then we've got, the typical, this one doesn't have as many door replacements. It has hollow metal doors, more hardware than doors are being replaced. And then a lot of the toilet rooms are terrazzo, so they'll get the grind and polish cleaned up. This floor plan for the kitchen probably looks very similar to Holmes or Frost. Very similar in layout and functionality. Pretty much the same thing. It functions fine, it just needs to update in the equipment, make it easier to move around, so we're lowering any of those raised curbs, putting casters on elements that can move around for cleaning or for use. And this one has terrazzo flooring, so we'll grind and polish that for, sparkly new look.
And as a former middle school, similar to our other 5-6s, it's a large kitchen, so it has the space, just updating everything.
And it looks like, you're taking out a lavatory toilet area?
No, it doesn't show up with the red. They'll
Oh.
say the kitchen staff's.
Oh,
toilet room.
okay, that
Yeah.
stays. Okay,
Yep,
thank
that's
you.
just kind of grayed out.
Okay.
We are replacing the coiling doors in this one with motorized doors too, so easier to operate.
Got one quick question. The planning room that looks like, that's kind of right in the middle of the top of the kitchen area?
Yes.
It's in the existing and the new. But is this like a What kind of planning room are we talking about?
It really
I
isn't a
love-
planning room. It's utilized in different ways. I believe that
They had some
At
of their MOCA
Jackson, do they have, that, what is stated the planning room, the room that's next to the cafeteria?
I was just in there, you're talking about that's connected to the kitchen there?
Mhm.
behind? We were just in there, we were talking about taking it early and whatnot, and I believe the principal said they had some of their MOCI students have lunch in there.
Okay, yeah,
And they said they'll just have it in a different space if we take it over, and it wasn't an issue, but it's just used by a small amount of students.
okay, yeah. I was afraid to say what we did when I was principal there because that was so long ago, but we used to have some of our itinerant staff, like our social work staff, do small groups out of there, things like that.
Okay.
So we don't have planning rooms at the upper elementary school. That's probably terminology carried over from when it was a middle school, that
Okay.
it was called that.
Uh-huh.
But it sounds like that's an auxiliary lunchroom space
It's just
for our
who
MOCI
have
students.
the more
Okay.
sound affected by the noise in the cafeteria.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Are we here?
Oh.
What do you wanna-
For the LMC, one of the major changes to the space is that you'll see on the existing floor plan, we have some doors, just a single door on each side of the center space that just pop right out into the corridor. We've created a more focused central entrance with the double doors that pull into the space. So when they open up, they're not opening to traffic either. So that creates more of a focal, and those will be done in a different color brick, so they'll pop out, and they'll have an accent soffit as well.
So similar how you did the accent soffit at Holmes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Great.
And this space, it was labeled the professional library, is turning into the idea factory. So that will get those nice angular windows. We end up with a small collaboration room to the left of that, which is flexible furniture, but it creates like that one-off room where teachers can teach in there, or students can go there to work on a group project. The books are just south of that, mostly flexible furniture, even further south, and then the flex space was the old computer lab. We end up making the workroom into 3 spaces: the office, a small group office, and then the workroom just for the media center. And then those office spaces pop out into the LMC, so visibility, again, we're making sure that everybody has a good view. And this one, the staff really wanted to add some color, some liveliness to the space. You'll see there's a lot of color here. When we show the real renderings, the walkthrough, you'll see this is just kind of sketchy as we're working through it in our minds, putting color on the paper, but we really wanted to add that vibrant color to the space per their desires.
Is that nano wall, not a nano wall?
This is a view looking at the Idea Factory in the further right, and then those are the collapsible screens similar to Franklin. So that collaboration space, you still can see into it, but it gives them like a small group setting. And then Churchill is our high school for this year. Churchill's LMC is massive compared to to some other spaces. So you'll see how we've kind of broken that space up. The main focus is still kitchen. We've got one toilet room that we have an alternate for in this space as well, to add the wall tile to that we've added in previous years up near the front entrance. And then we'll do a couple rooms with epoxy tile or epoxy flooring that have tile currently, and then the rest of them have that terrazzo that will get grind and polish. I think that's it. One feature we talked about pairing with the roof projects that's going to be going on in the 25 summer. And talking with the roofing consultant, we've coordinated to decrease the height of the clear story windows at the cafeteria space, because the new roofing insulation requirement will be much deeper. So in order to coordinate together, we've decreased the height of them by, I think it's 12 inches, to allow that roofing insulation to meet code. So we've made sure to coordinate with all those pieces.
If I'm not mistaken, one of the concerns that the building has is at a certain time when the sun's hitting through there, it pretty much bakes that cafeteria. So we'll probably put some type of UV protection over there as well. So now it'll be a little bit smaller glass amount, and then we can make sure we get some UV protection and maybe even a little bit of tinting to not bake the students. The food needs to get baked, the students not so much.
Yes.
Yeah, there'll be tinted windows to help with that. But still allow some of that natural light in,
Mhm.
since it's landlocked. All right, to the kitchen. The kitchen space, on the left is the existing space. There was the kitchen, and then they had a kind of a divider wall, but it was still part of the kitchen that says storage. We've broken through that wall and taken some of that, which was, it was kind of an ancillary space. I don't know exactly what they were using for, but it was office. Some of the concession stuff was in there. We've taken that over to get a larger walk-in cooler and freezer. So you notice that takes up the majority of the upper portion. It's very large, but functionality and for the students they're serving, it will work really well. And then basically, the rest of the kitchen functionality works the same, just sprucing it up, getting the equipment fixed that needs to be fixed, everything on casters. This kitchen it currently has quarry tile floor, so it will get the ultra flooring, the rolled good, kind of sparkly flooring that you've seen in mostly elementaries and upper elementaries. So we'll get that flooring to go over top of that, since it doesn't, it's only part quarry tile and part VCT.
Yeah, the other two high schools are the Terrazzo.
Terrazzo, yep. Oh, Stevenson?
It's partial, isn't it?
Yeah,
Stevenson's the rolled goods.
Yeah,
Oh, is it? Okay.
Stevenson's not done yet, but yeah, Stevenson will have the same flooring, so once that's done, you'll be able to see that. And we'll get, some of the doors will be replaced to function better in the space. Serving line is not being touched at all at this space. Stevenson and Franklin, we did touch it, but here we're not doing any upgrades to it. As of, today, it functions well.
And just to
Was that
piggyback
one
on
that we
that,
had
if you recall, many of you were on the board at the time that we had completely, we completely gutted out their serving line. And so all the items on that serving line are relatively new and in wonderful shape, good condition.
And then the last slide. The media center space. As you can see, the big blue area is all of the media center. When you come in the upper left, that's the main entrance. You'll walk into a flexible space, but to the side, there'll be some group tables. Similarly to Stevenson, these are grouped with little displays so they can do group work in them, and then flexible furniture. As you make your way down into the center space, there'll be a focal ceiling point that will draw your attention there and also lower you into a more collaborative setting. The teachers can use it as a space to set up a classroom, or it can be a silent space for reading. It has really good acoustical value. And then the lower, like the darker blue, is planned to be another classroom type setting, still flexible though, so everything moves around. And then to the other side is the existing computer lab turns into the flex classroom, so that wall opens. What's unique about this space though is we built in an esports space. So we're working with the LMC specialist. He said, our esports team is growing. We're gonna need some type of space. So that space will have specific tables and furniture for those computers and consoles that will be able to be locked and stored. It'll have a dark black ceiling, some fun lighting, a little bit different kind of mood to that space for when the students are gaming. The workroom got reduced in size to accommodate that esports space as well, but work functionally well.
It's a large workroom right now.
Yeah.
What's happening with the computer lab?
It is turning into the flex space. So that's where all the tables are in that lower right corner.
Okay, so are we eliminating the computer lab, or is it?
That's what we've been doing at all of the LMCs, generally have a computer lab attached to it. We've been converting that into the flex classroom.
So they use the carts, the
There's
Chromebook carts?
a Chromebook cart in there.
And so they could still utilize it like that, but they're not fixed computers.
Okay.
They'll have the Chromebook carts, and they'll be able to utilize those in that space.
Great.
One other space that we added kind of last minute is, what we're calling it now,
The offices around there.
it's the group room for media broadcasting in the future. I can't remember, it was like an assistant principal said that they're interested in adding that program, so we're creating a flexible space that will allow that acoustically in the future.
And that is,
If you go to so if you're on the left, there's the dark blue. Just north of that, it says group room.
okay. And that's where they were talking about wanting the green screen and things like that?
Yes, yep.
So we have something similar to that at Stevenson in Miss Rosman's radio and TV. We've set up some of those spaces similar to that.
Good.
And then this is your view looking towards that flex space in our preliminary view. See it has no furniture, but this will be one that you'll see a walkthrough on as well. But we're just gonna add a little bit of, texture to that.
Very nice.
Any questions on any of the 25 projects?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on.
Yes.
Alrighty. Any other questions on these? Thank you so much.
Thank
This
you.
is exciting stuff.
I'll see you soon for the renderings.
Thank you, sounds great. Moving on to our next item, item 3D is the purchase of school buses. Mr. Francis.
Go ahead.
My grandkids too. Have a bus.
We live? All right. So we have, as we discussed last month, we brought a few buses to the board for their approval. At the original study session with that conversation, we thought we would have all of the bus quotes at that time for the August meeting. And instead, we've pushed these 6 buses into the September meeting. We got all of our quotes put together. These types of buses aren't on the MSBO consortium, so we had to go out and get 3 separate quotes for them. I did put some extra information into your the memo I wrote for Mrs. Oquist, which she also put into your packet. At one time, you guys had asked about, just kind of an update on what the fleet looks like. I was writing it, and then I looked at it when it was all done. I was like, they're gonna think I'm insane. I've got like all these different ways that I put these lists down for you, but if you're happy with it, then good, because we got that. And I want to thank Ross Robert, our garage supervisor, who helped me get all that information together, and I just kind of cross-matched them for you for you to see those pieces. We also got some current prices for diesel, gasoline, and propane for you in those packets. So I hope that was helpful. With regard to this purchase specifically, and I did mention this in the memo, while the Bluebirds from Holland bus is not the lowest, like, hard dollar amount on the purchase, you can see that, or at least I've mentioned in that the vast majority of our fleet are Bluebirds. Had a conversation with Mr. Robert, and we said, like, so, he said, it'd be fine to have the others. However, we were discussing it and saying, like, we buy parts, we have them on the shelf, we have the maintenance items on these. And,
We're familiar
our
with
guys are
fixing them.
familiar with them. In the long run, we said, it probably makes some sense, both fiscally and just in your day-to-day work on these, to say, let's stick with what we have a majority of and keep going with the Bluebirds. So I wanted to make sure that the board was okay with that type of decision. Okay. Okay. So with that, I'd like to put this on the voting meeting for next week. These were the dollars out of the bond that we had designated for bus purchase.
Just kind of as a side note, do we ever look at buses in terms of their seating capacity when looking at making comparisons for purchases?
So the standard 77 passenger bus is pretty much the standard, general bus that we own. You'll see differences in seating when it came to like a wheelchair bus. If you really looked at those quotes, one of them was an 18, one of them was a 19. It's really by one, and that's not a bus that you generally load up. It's a specific bus for students that need the capacity of the wheelchair, et cetera. The 77 passenger is just pretty much the standard regular bus, if that's where you were asking about.
Thank you.
And the propanes are the same. The type of fuel doesn't matter at that, because it doesn't take up any of the space. So that's the seating on those.
Okay, any other questions or comments on this item? Nope, put it on for the regular voting meeting
Thank
coming
you.
up. All righty. And the next item is the purchase of tractors.
So the John Deere tractors that you have the quote for in your packet, they are from the, and I have to, boy, there's a lot of bus pages on this thing, holy schmoly. Still doing it, there we go.
What information?
There's the quote from John Deere. So the quote from John Deere is, as you can see, is from a state of Michigan consortium, and it's the agricultural, let me get the official name for it, for everybody here, is from the Agricultural Grounds and Maintenance Equipment Contract via the Michigan Department of Technology, Management, and Budget. Bit of a mouthful, but that's why you only see the singular quote. These are satisfying, this does satisfy our requirement to bid through that contract. So what these are used for, essentially, for mowing and for plowing snow. That's why if you looked at that, if you took a look at the quote, you see the blade, the snowplow blade as an attachment. What we're going to do is, I mentioned in the memo, we're going to auction off most of what we have, which are the older ones, save a couple, like maybe 2 of the best that we currently have from the school buildings, put those aside in case anywhere around the district at some point in the winter or even summer, somebody's tractor goes down and we need to repair it. We've got one that we can send over to that school so those building supervisors can continue to push the snow off the sidewalk or mow the grass around their areas. Just as a general reminder, our grounds team goes out and mows the large spaces at our complexes, but the building supervisors are responsible for clearing snow on sidewalks and for also mowing around some of the other areas on their property. So that's what these were for. This is coming from the 2021 bond, and these are the dollars that we designated over just for exactly for these items, for those maintenance equipment.
Okay. Mr. Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Am I reading this correct, Phil, that the tractors themselves, the price is 76, but the blades for each tractor is like 1,300?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right, I want to make sure that I was
Yep.
looking
On,
at that
on their
correctly.
first page there, and this quote is a little confusing because they come back on another set of pages that have like the regular retails and the discounts showing that and all the rest. So what they're saying is that first line is the tractor itself with the mower deck, and then we add on the 48-inch blade.
Great, thanks.
All righty. Any other comments or questions on this item? We will put this on for a vote at our next meeting then also. And that concludes Building and Site.
Thank you, Mrs. Burton. Thank you, Mr. Francis.
Thank you for your time.
That was a busy category tonight. All right, we're going to go on to item 4, our Finance Committee. Mrs. Bonifield?
I have nothing tonight. Superintendent Oquist, anything for finance?
We do not. We will have a very busy month next month. That is our big finance month, is October.
Thank you for the heads up on that. Okay. All right, we're moving on to item 5, the Curriculum Committee, and I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Acosta.
Thank you, President Bradford.
You're
This
welcome.
evening, we have 2 items, but they may take a minute. So our first item is 5A, Student Achievement Update and Goal Review for 2024 to 2025. We will have Mrs. Oquist and Superintendent and Mrs. O'Brien presenting.
Thank you, Mrs. Acosta. We're going to start with our spring M-STEP results, our state testing results. But before I get started, I want to introduce you all to Mr. Casada. So Mr. Casada has stepped into the assessment role this year, and so he wanted to come tonight and be a part of our presentation and be introduced to the community in his new role. So
Good evening, welcome. Yay.
Thank you.
So I am just going to go through our state results from last spring. They came out a couple weeks ago. Our parent letters will be going home at the end of this week or the beginning of next week. So those were delivered from the state of Michigan, where parents get their own personalized student results. This evening, I'm going to go over district results by our district scores by grade and by content, by test. So let's see if it can come up on the screen. Thank you. So as you know, one of our district priorities, well, one of our main district priorities is student learning. And so I just wanted to share this with you and read it. So our priority reads, demonstrating a strategic commitment to student learning as evidenced by measurable growth and achievement for all students through consistent, rigorous, and engaging curriculum and instruction. Student learning is at our core. Like, I would like that on the wall up in academic services, right? Student learning is our core. So some quick, wonderful highlights for our results this year. And up on the screen, it's a little difficult to read, but I'm gonna just go through the highlights from left to right. So all of our state test results are above the state average, which is what we would expect, but all grades 3rd through 11th are above the state average. Our year-over-year increases, we had some nice, strong increases in 3rd, 4th, 6th, and 7th. Those were our strongest grade levels this year. And in those grade levels, our ELA and math scores have increased over last year. Our largest growth was our PSAT ELA 8th grade score. It increased by 8%, which is significant. So, you know, sometimes as I share these results, we've increased by 0.2 or 0.8 or 1.2, but an 8% increase is a nice, strong increase. Social studies at 5th and 8th grade have increased and are above the state average. Science at 8th and 11th, so you know science and social studies are only given at 5th grade, 8th grade, and 11th grade. And so our science scores at 8th and 11th have increased. So I'm gonna go over a little bit about Tri-County in a minute, but we have some very nice growth in the Tri-County, in our ranking in the Tri-County for some of our grade levels, and we've made some nice improvements that put us in the top 10 districts of 81 districts of the Tri-County. So we're very, very proud of that and very proud of our teachers and our students at those grade levels. And even though our 8th grade math might have decreased their scores, they actually increased their Tri-County rankings. So that was pretty significant also. And then areas we want to continue to grow in is our 5th grade ELA and math, our SAT scores at 11th grade, and then our 7th grade we have a little bit of growth and a little bit of stagnation. So we're going to go through each one of these. So our Tri-County rankings, so you know that one of our goals is to be in the top 25%, which would be about the top 20 districts of 81 districts in the Tri-County. And what we look at is just to see how we are performing against schools that are like us, just like the state does on the parent dashboard. There's a section where we compare, where districts are compared to their peer districts. So we look at that. But one of the things when it comes to statewide testing is typically a school or school district, they perform along their economically disadvantaged percentage lines. It's pretty well known you perform typically based on how high your percentage of economically disadvantaged is. So we do keep track of that. Mr. Casada pulled all of the district's economically disadvantaged percentages. And so this one example, and I will send you the whole spreadsheet of all of our districts, is our 6th grade ELA. So we were in the top 10 for 6th grade ELA. We have 36.2% of our students who are economically disadvantaged. all of those districts that are green below our blue line have less economically disadvantaged students than us, and we outperformed them. So I can say that a different way, we scored better with more at-risk students than other districts did. So some of those districts only had 21% of their students economically disadvantaged, and we're at 36. And our students did better at 6th grade ELA. So this is one of the things that helps us look at not only how are we doing aligned to the state expectation and our state standards, but how are we doing with all of the hard work we do with our kids who might come to us needing some additional help.
Yeah, so I'm just going to put a fine point on that. Thank you so much, Mrs. O'Brien. You did an outstanding job explaining that. You may recall that we started sharing this with you last year. We wanted to see where we were outperforming our academically disadvantaged ranking. And so when we rank all of those 81 school districts by the number of students who would be considered economically disadvantaged, knowing that that is often highly correlative to their performance on these types of statewide assessments, our goal is to outperform that expectation and to put supports in place and to work with our teachers' collective efficacy, their work together, that knowing that their collaboration together, utilizing the resources that we have, and the strong Tier 1 curriculum that is in place, that we have a belief that we can overcome what is typical for our academically disadvantaged status. And so what we have for you, thanks to Mr. Casada, is we have where our ranking is, and then when you see school districts below us in green, that is where they have a lower percentage of economically disadvantaged students, and we ranked higher than them in our overall achievement in that area. Where you see a red, it would be where they have outperformed our students with a higher economically disadvantaged percentage. So I'm going to pause there for a moment and see if you have any clarifying questions. This is really important to us internally because oftentimes we see school districts perform very much what we would say on the line. So on that trajectory from lowest socioeconomic disadvantage to highest, we often see a strong correlation throughout research and throughout our own performance in how we rank in relation to that. So it's really significant when we see our students outperforming at this level.
President Bradford.
Thank you. When you look at the 36.2% or any of the 11.7, that's district-wide, correct?
That's that
Or
grade
is that
level.
It is that
sixth
grade
grade
level.
only?
It is that grade level.
Only that grade level?
Yes, now
Okay.
we're right around that.
Right,
We're
so it
right, that's
fluctuates by grade level, but that's about our district average anyway,
within
this
would
particular
you say a
example,
percent or
but
so?
we might
Yeah.
have a little bit less
Okay,
or more at a
okay,
particular.
so that's based on that cohort of students?
It is, but I would say we're within about a percent at every grade level of
Perfect,
that.
Perfect, thank
Mhm.
you.
Mrs. Frank.
That was my question.
Okay. Mrs. Jarvis.
Thank you.
When we determine the economically disadvantaged students, are we still using the free and reduced lunch form? And do you think that has been, is it still as accurate as it used to be before we went to full free lunches?
You know, we have seen our percentage continue to increase for our population, so we are making the assumption that we are still capturing the overwhelming majority of our students that would qualify. Certainly, there may still be others out there, but we haven't seen a drop in that number.
Good. So we are sending you all of these sheets. We actually are summarizing it differently tonight than putting all these small charts into the slideshow. So you will get those, but you will get the same information in a different way. So here is a summary of each grade level that we outperformed districts with less economically disadvantaged students. So in ELA, third grade, we outperformed 14 districts. In fourth grade, 10 districts. In sixth grade, 14, these are all ELA, 14 districts. Seventh grade, 8 districts. In mathematics, we outperformed 13 districts in third grade, 17 districts in fourth grade math, 12 districts in sixth grade math, and 8 districts in seventh. So these were our big movers this year. And our scores went up for the most part. I'm gonna give you some examples where maybe we didn't, but other people went down. So this is a summary of our tri-county data. Yes, sir.
Question.
Oh, sorry.
Mr. Johnson?
I just want to make sure, the sheet from last week that we had.
Yep.
That, and you talked about it earlier, that our 8th grade math achievement decreased year over year, but
Yep.
LPS improved our ranking in tri-county. Does the less economically disadvantaged rankings, are those included
Yes.
in this? Okay.
Yes. So typically, I think this is what Mr. Casada might have wanted to say a minute ago, while we were asking questions, is if more of our students who were struggling in first grade, second grade, third grade, eighth grade, whatever, more of those students who perform better, they grow higher, faster. That's why we put the interventions and all of the things that we've done, then our score typically goes up more. When we're pretty consistently teaching a grade level curriculum but not have enough supports for the kids who aren't quite there, then our scores kind of stay flat. So it's the influx, the support we've been giving our kids that I will tell you, if you just look at third grade, so I mean, you've read the newspapers how the state has said how poorly we have done, and they want to put some measures in place because we are not hitting the mark. And you know, third grade's the year, right? We've had the third grade retention bill and all of those things. But if you look at Livonia Public Schools' third grade ELA score, we not only went up 5.6%, but the state went down. So there's a great example of we grew and the state went down, so we moved up even higher. Because, you know, some of the districts had to have gone down in order for the state average to go down. So that's a really like point of pride, is that in a time when other school districts might be struggling to help support their kids, some of the things we've put into place are becoming more consistent and making that impact. Does that make sense?
It does. And a follow-up question is, if our 8th grade math scores are decreasing year after year, but we're outperforming, and we improved our ranking, then other district scores are basically tanking.
So more of them went down.
Decreasing at a greater
rate.
There's some test change this past year, so PSAT was online. So the ELA and the math was online. And so I'll explain that when I get to those grade levels. So there's some reasons to think about that, but yes, so we went down a little bit, but more people went down more.
Okay.
Good?
Good.
Okay, so fourth grade. So we went up almost 3 points, the state went down in ELA. We went up 5 points in math, the state just went up a little bit. So we're increasing our gap from the state when we do things like that. And then I just put down at the bottom, again, the same information I shared before is how many districts we outperformed on this slideshow, just so, you know, right on that grade level you could see we outperformed those districts. So.
And that's in relation to the economically disadvantaged data?
That is, yes.
Yes.
So fifth grade is an area we need to do some digging in. So our ELA scores went down 6 points. So last year we grew a little bit when I was here last year. The new ELA curriculum was being utilized and we got an initial burst, but now we went back down. So we have to do some digging as to why that is. But as you can see, the state only went up 1/10 of a point. Our math scores only went up a teeny bit, and the state went up 1.1 points. So slight gain in mathematics. Social studies, we went up 3 points. The state went up 0.3 points. Science went down a little bit. The state science scores went up 1.5. So 5th grade is just a year when we look at it, we need to dig in a little bit more. It's very variable. Obviously, it is also across the state. You know, and so Mrs. Corey, Mr. Grizak, Mr. Casada, and myself, when we work with elementary principals, our upper Ls, this is an area of focus this year, is our upper Ls.
And we want to take a look at as well the transition that our students make because of where that cohort was performing in 4th grade was strong. And when we really need to dig into the why of this. And students who did not hit that mark in 5th grade, what that looks like. So that really is beginning to drill down to each, not just the school level, but each individual student level. Because they were performing previously, and then they have this dip, and then they go back up at 6th grade. So,
Yes, and so 6th grade, yeah, oh,
Mrs. Jarvis?
Are
Want me to
we
go back?
able to drill down and identify those particular students?
yes, absolutely. And then we can take a look at whether or not those students were on an IRIP. When they were in earlier grades, we can take a look at the interventions that they've had. That's where individual schools with their own team during their data dialogue days should be looking at each of those individual students and their performance year over year. And are these students that received intervention in previous years, or are they not? Are they students who previously scored within, at grade level on the iReady? They previously passed the M-STEP at 3rd and 4th grade. And so it really is taking a look at what is different on that 5th grade exam.
We could conceivably track any given student's progress and look for trends.
Absolutely.
we do.
We do
We
do that.
That's
send a
incredible.
spreadsheet from our K-4s to the 5-6. We meet with them in the spring, and we talk about what students have received and what students might need, maybe, you know, social emotionally, academically. And so we try to set them up for success as they transfer over to the 5-6s. So now we need to dig in a little bit more, maybe instructionally, maybe, you know, curriculum alignment. So again, like that 5th grade ELA, we got an initial bump last year with the new ELA, and then it went down. So what was that reason?
We could identify, for example, if there was one classroom that had a rough transition going up to upper L, and target that, whatever that is, with the proper intervention.
Yep.
That's exciting.
Mrs. Benefield?
Do we ever see, especially like in the 5th grade, where we have significant differences between buildings?
Sometimes. So, you know, we have more, you know, not all of our K-4s are Title I. Some are, some aren't. So, you know, it just, again, depends on the school and how many students they end at 4th grade who are still 2 grade levels below. So that's an area we are really digging in at, is looking at that group of students who are not just a little below, but who are a lot below. Because by the end of 4th grade, we really whittle that group smaller, but then they get in these bigger schools, and then, what do we need to work on to strengthen that support for kids who are just, might be missing some things.
So, and I know we have been talking about consistency among our grades and our buildings, but I'm assuming that if we find a pocket of students, that we're going to make sure that we provide additional tier 2 and 3 to those students, that we're not gonna just say, well, every building gets X amount of supports, right? We're gonna try and bring those individual classrooms or buildings or students or pockets of students or grades. We're working with every student across the district, no matter what triad they're in,
Correct.
to become as successful as
Absolutely.
everyone else in that grade 5 cohort.
That's one of the beauties of what
Absolutely.
Superintendent Oquist talked about with teachers collaborating together in our professional learning teams and saying, so in our group of 3 classrooms, who didn't get it right now? Let's fix that now. Let's do some additional support. And so that ownership of kids and then that team and saying who taught that well the first time, who's interested in trying to teach it a different way so that we target those kids right away before it becomes a bigger gap.
So I think part of what you're trying to say is not only are we teaching, working to improve our students, we're also, what you're saying is we're also working to improve our teachers. Is part of what you're saying is everybody has a strength and we're trying to share those strengths so that every kid, no matter what classroom they're in, if that's not a strength of a particular teacher, that we make sure that we fill those gaps as well. So we really are striving to make sure that every classroom, every 5th grade, 6th grade classroom across the district, we're working collaboratively to make sure that every single 5th grade student is actually getting a comparable education, no matter what building or what teacher that they have.
That's what that beauty of those teams are, yes, 100%. You want to join our MTSS committee? We always need help.
Exactly.
So then our 6th grade scores go up this year. So our 5th grade is an area we're really going to look at, but our 6th grade ELA, we actually ended up number 8 in the Tri-County with those. We went up. The state stayed the same from last year. So again, we widened our gap from the state. And then also our math scores went up at the end of, our 5-6 experience. So both of those grade levels have made some significant growth. By the time they leave the 5-6, the 6th grade group has grown. So then our 7th grade scores is an area we went up a teeny little bit in ELA, and the state only went up a point, and then our math went up a little bit more than that. As you know, 7th grade, our mid-school math is just a couple years old, so that's a different way of teaching math, and they start it in 5th and 6th grade, and then 7th and 8th in order to prepare them for high school math. So having teachers teach that, it's very problem-based, and so we've slowly been growing again in our teacher strategies in utilizing that program. And then, so 8th grade PSAT, so we utilize the PSAT 8 for our ELA score for the state of Michigan and our math, and then we still have an M-STEP Science and Social Studies score. But this year, SAT and PSAT were online. There was practice problems that kids could do that we asked our teachers to do with them. So when you look at that 72.8, I was extremely excited about that score. That is a nice growth score, but lots of districts made that score. So that the state score went up. So they went from reading longer passages in the ELA 8 for M-STEP to some shorter passages because the SAT is more about close reading. And so it says we're very aligned with SAT, and so we're hoping that now this is going to continue to grow. But so that score is outstanding, no matter whether the state also grew. We were very happy with that. Our 8th grade math went down a little bit. Again, that math score was down, but do you see the state score went more? And so more districts didn't do as well in our 8th grade math.
And that was also a new exam.
It's online. So
Online.
we were still giving the PSAT. It's just a different version of the PSAT. It's the electronic version. And then our social studies scores went up, and our science scores went up at 8th grade. And then our last assessment is 11th grade SAT. We, again, at 11th grade, give the M-STEP Science and Social Studies test. And so the evidence-based reading and writing, our score went down a little bit from the previous year, and the state went down a teeny little bit. So pretty flat for the state, and Mrs. Rousseau has already started to work with her CALs on looking at how we performed on this, because she is very invested in having our students be able to pass that evidence-based reading and writing portion of the SAT. And then our math scores, this is another area between 5th grade. That's the, my department's big focus for elementary. And then our high school SAT math is an area. Again, both of these tests were online this time, so that was a little bit different. And so we need to dig into what that looks like. And College Board gives us some different tools than the state of Michigan does. So SAT, PSAT comes from the College Board, and so Mrs. Caldwell is going to work with our high school math teachers and dig into that test and try and get some things where we misaligned, or what was some of the reasons. Social studies went up a little bit, and our science scores went down a little bit.
Okay.
Questions?
So for the SATs, I
Yep.
guess I'm thinking this is determining our graduation. This fits with our graduation requirements, right?
Say that a different way.
Sorry, and my stomach's growling. When they take the SAT in 11th grade, that's one of their graduation requirements for
Yes.
exit.
Yes,
is.
we require all of our kids to take the SAT, the state assessment.
So is this prohibiting students from graduating?
No.
Okay.
No, they have to take it. For graduation.
No, it doesn't matter. Their score does not
Right,
impact
they
their
just have to
graduation.
participate. Now, if we have more kids who need to take this again because they don't have what they need, then yes, our math department, we need to dig into that for our kids who, need that, who have plans that will utilize that.
Require that, yeah.
So that's, we want to work with our math teachers and dig into this. How did the electronic version assess them? 11 points is a pretty significant drop. And so where's our why? What's the why with this? And so we don't have that yet, but that's what we need to dig into.
Okay. And I know, again, this is, it's difficult to look at these numbers without considering that not all students are looking to pass the SAT. Because if it's not part of their future plans, there isn't that incentive. So, thank you.
All right.
Do you want to hop back to the summary slide? And I will briefly go over while we're on that. We talked about these goals, and we are still refining them. But as President Bradford and I talked, we thought it would be helpful to just remind you and the community where we're headed with some of the goals that we're setting for our district goals specific to student achievement. So we will continue to have our goal of our district being in the top 25% or the top 20 districts out of 81 in the Tri-County area in both ELA and math. 100% of areas tested, of grade levels tested in ELA and math. Previously, we'd utilized 75%. And so the Tri-County is Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb. I believe you said that at the beginning. I'll just reiterate that. And we are also looking for, what we had talked about was looking for incremental growth, incremental year-over-year growth. That's what we want to see. While it's nice to see those 5 and 7 percentage point jumps, it would not be realistic to expect those every single year for several years in a row. However, we are looking at incremental growth of 2% in ELA and math at all grade levels tested each year of the next 3 years. So that 2% incremental growth every year for the next 3 years. In the iReady, the iReady is another assessment that we utilize and we rely on quite heavily in grades K through 8 in our school district. And so we wanted to take a look at the elementary level, and again, I'll share this with you in more detail, but if you remember, there is a green, a yellow, a red, and a dark red category. Green is at or above grade level, yellow is about 1 grade level below, red is 2 grade levels below, dark red is 3 grade levels or more below. And so when we took a look at that data, we took a look at 3 years worth of iReady data at the elementary level and the middle school level. And we believe that it will be most impactful for us to focus on the yellow category for the elementary grades, so that 1 grade level below, to look to bump those students into the green, the at grade level. What we want to do is shore up as many of our students as possible before we move them on to the secondary level. We also had a very small band within the red category, about 4%, 4 to 6% year over year. And although we would love to have that be 0, we do know that when we look at the triangle of tiered intervention, there generally are approximately that percentage of students that fall within that tier 3. And that would really equate to what we're seeing in that red and dark red category. So the idea that we would significantly reduce that 4% down to 0, it really is not a goal that we think is realistic. And while we absolutely want stretch goals, we also want goals that we believe are attainable for our students, our staff, and us as leaders in this district. So we're looking at impacting the yellow category, which again is the intervention making the impact to move those students into grade level. However, at the middle school, we see a much greater number of students in the red and the dark red. We're seeing somewhere between 22 and 24% in that red or dark red category. And so what we want to do is look at moving those students into the yellow category and moving those students out of that. As we know, that gap often becomes greater as they move through the grades, right? They've been exposed to more difficult curriculum each year, and so if they've struggled as readers, let's say, that struggle compounds year after year. What was perhaps 1 grade level below in 2nd grade has become 3 grade levels below when they're in 8th grade. And that's because as the curriculum has gotten more difficult, even though they may have made growth, they would have to make significant, double that growth year over year to overcome that gap. And so what we want to do is take a look at moving those students, especially from the dark red, out of the dark red category, and as many as possible out of the red category. So again, that will make more sense as we're taking a look at that pyramid of intervention, or that inverted pyramid of intervention. But that is really where we believe that we can make an impact, and where we think we have put in the supports, whether that's through the new elementary day and the intervention model, the additional the support from our literacy coaches, from our secondary facilitators, from our academic ESTs. We believe that the intervention classes at the middle school that Tony and Teresa shared with you last week, where we have 6 to 7 students for a 10-week burst of additional intervention in either ELA or math. So we've put all of that. We want to see what is the return on that investment as it relates to student achievement. So those first 4 goals for us will be related to student achievement. The 5th goal will be looking at chronic absenteeism. As I've shared with you, the state of Michigan is the 4th highest in terms of chronic absenteeism currently. We are seeing Wayne County as the most significantly impacted county in the state. And so that is something that we're looking at very closely. We see the impact it's having on our learners. When they're missing even a couple of days a month, they end up missing more than 10% of their instruction and their opportunities for learning. And so especially at the secondary level, we have seen the impact of this. We've also seen the impact on our staff when they're trying to meet the needs of 6 students who were absent in first hour, 4 different students in second hour, 7 students in third hour, 3 students in fifth, so on and so forth. And on each day, that compounding, right? When a student is absent for a day or 3 days or a day periodically, each week. And so we're really digging into the why of that as well, by individual student. And we are looking at a goal of a reduction in the percentage of chronic absenteeism of 3% each year for the next 3 years. And so we're taking a look at the total district percentage, and the one piece that we want to continue to take a look at is whether or not we want to have that goal determined for elementary and secondary differently, because we see that rate of absenteeism higher at our secondary schools than we do at our elementary. And so we want to determine, is 3% the right marker as a district-wide, or should we be looking at something that is adjusted based on level? So those are the 5 areas. They are not insignificant goals. We talked about this. Many of these areas we all determined would be certainly stretch goals for our district. They're meant to be 3-year goals, but we will have checkpoints every year at this time each year as part of that cycle.
Mrs. Burton.
Mrs. Oquist, you spoke a lot about what we're going to be doing with some of our struggling learners. In the course of a given day, when our struggling learners are getting some of this reinforced instruction, what will be going on with our students who are not needing that? So can you address that for those
Sure.
families who may be listening?
Absolutely. So I can speak to that at the elementary level. Within our newly structured day, we have opportunities for all of our students to receive individualized small group instruction based on their level. And so the way we have structured the day so that, one, the intervention block time is no new instruction. So we know that students aren't being pulled for support and taken out of their core Tier 1 instruction. So that means that's protected time for all of our students. During that intervention block, we also have enrichment time in our other specials area classes. So Project Lead the Way, art, music, physical education, and our media center. And so students will have an opportunity during that enrichment time who are achieving at grade level or above to be able to not only have small group instruction that is usually about 4 days a week out of 5, tailored to their higher level. So they're able to get more direct instruction at their level, but they will also have more opportunities for enrichment in those specials areas as well. So really this has not only increased the time when we're able to provide targeted support to our struggling learners, but to be able to provide more just right supports for our higher achieving students as well.
Excellent.
Yes.
Thank you.
And certainly at the secondary level, we really do that primarily through class placement. So that would either be through advanced placement in classes or through AP. So those are different, but we have both advanced classes at the middle school level, and then we begin, of course, the AP opportunities at the high school level.
The support classes that we have in place, at the middle school, they are 10 weeks, so they miss a 10-week elective instead of missing a whole semester of an elective. So we moved to a shorter burst, as Superintendent Oquist stated, so that we could give students an influx, but they're not missing maybe some of the areas where they want to grow and are interested in. So we readjusted our elective offerings at the middle school so that there are still some semester-long ones like band, but there are more choices at 10 weeks, and so that students can then get an ELA burst and then still get foods the next 10 weeks. And so they still get their Tier 1 core 7th grade, 8th grade courses, whether they're in the advanced or in the general. And then the same thing when you think of the mascot time that we have put in place both at middle and high school in order to support kids. So I can get extra help. I also can, if I'm at a grade level or above, stop and talk to Mrs. Frank and ask for help on my paper that I'm writing. So it's 2 days a week at our high schools, we have our mascot time, and 5 days a week at our middle school. So we've tried to create a schedule that provides supports to all of our students so that they can become
the leaders of their own learning and help them advocate to go talk to a teacher regardless of whether they're a struggler or at grade level, because we want them to be able to advocate for themselves and drive some of their own learning.
And then in addition to advocating for themselves, because I'd love to say that every single one of our students is going to do that, but for some of our students who are not going to be comfortable advocating for themselves, we also do tap on, I'm sorry, thank you. For those of our students who may not be advocating for themselves, we don't just let that go.
No.
We tap on the shoulder the ones that we need to have come in for reinforced learning.
Yes. Teachers identify kids to come, and they don't have a choice. They come to mascot time to do some reteaching. Again, we're building that collaboration of teachers saying, so we just gave this assessment, who did well, who needs some reteaching, who wants to take them at mascot time. I'll take a group of students who are at and above grade level, and you tag a group of students who need some help with, solving equations in pre-algebra.
Excellent, thank you.
We appreciate the time you gave us on this tonight. This is really, really important. We were excited to share the areas of growth and achievement with you, but we also know that we are never satisfied with where we are. So we're excited to get to work on these new goals.
Thank you. And I just wanted to say kudos to all the staff involved. I know that, it's hard to see where you're going when you have these kinds of changes and changes with the schedule and requirements for PLTs, how we've changed even our half-days to accommodate for all of this planning that takes place. But when you see the results come through, it's really reassuring that these decisions were made in a thoughtful way. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Acosta, I just want to make sure that if any of our board have questions, we have Mrs. O'Brien, myself, Mr. Casada here, with regard to the information we sent out to parents with regard to grading and assessment. If there are any questions that you have or that have come to you that you wanted to ask us, we're happy to tackle any of those as well.
Thank you. I feel like you read my mind. Yes. So I know that there were questions regarding the retakes of tests for students and how that scoring was taken into account.
So I think there was maybe some miscommunication about that. So what we set as a committee and made a recommendation to our administrators and then rolled out to all of our teachers is that students who score below an 80% on something in the performance category, which is our assessment category. We had a lot of conversations about assignment and assessment, and it was 2 A's. And so we went with performance, which actually fit a lot of our other courses, our electives, that an assessment is a performance. So that's where that came from. And so students who score below 80% being what we would consider, at grade level, that they would be offered a retake opportunity. They would need to do some relearning, and that as a department would be decided. So a lot of our middle schools talked about students maybe doing a packet of some practice, some test corrections. So we left some of those pieces, but we called it re-engagement. So students needed to re-engage with the curriculum in the areas that they didn't understand. So in order to say, so I'm ready now to take a test again, and then take that test again. So I think the miscommunication is that test counts over if a student didn't perform as well on that second test as they did on the first. So our goal is learning, and so when a student shows that they've learned something, that's the score we're going to work on. And we're growing in this area and providing teachers with professional development. But one of the things, and Mr. Burnside, assistant principal at Churchill, did standards-based grading, and he did some presentations to teachers at our PD day, really thinking about sometimes if you're gonna give the whole test retake, but I really bombed a section, you should be doing the reteaching on the section and accept that they know this part of it. We're not there. We're growing in these areas, but some of the miscommunications that I need to help clarify is the student who's shown their learning, it's the best score of what they've shown. that make sense?
Yes,
And answer
and-
your question?
And I guess my point of reference in saying that is I was listening to different feedback is students, you know, the college-bound students that take the SATs or ACTs, when they receive their score, if they're not happy with it, they have the option to continue to take that until they receive the score that they want. And then they're able to submit the score that they find best suited for their goals. So I think that was probably the expectation of parents when they saw the grading, and maybe some messaging was lost along the way. But understanding also all the work that teachers put into
Yep.
creating assessments and grading assessments and having students, I appreciate that there's an additional requirement
Yes.
that students have to meet in order to retake the test, so.
Yes. And honestly, I mean, we do want to take into account, teachers were worried with this shift in a policy that they were going to have many students that they're going to need to give a second assessment and do some reteaching. And so it is a growth process. And, you know, we used 80%, so a student who got a 95 didn't say, I want to retake that assessment. So we are trying to thread those needles and have that growth mindset about providing students, again, the opportunity to show what they know. Again, if I didn't understand something, we want them to learn. Our goal is still learning, and we want them to be able to show us when they've relearned something and now they know it.
Thank you.
Does that help clarify?
Yes, thank you. Any other questions?
Well, I just want to thank Mr. Casada for coming tonight and quietly sitting next to me as we went through this, but I wanted him to be introduced to you all in his new role, so I'm sure he'll be back.
Thank you for joining us. Okay. So we'll move on to item 5B. Thank you. The purchase of Nijiro Japanese curriculum. Mrs. O'Brien.
Thank you. So this is the year, it's every 4 years that the Japanese consulate updates the curriculum resources that we utilize at Nijiro. And so this purchase is larger than on other years because we are purchasing textbooks, we are purchasing consumable books, so books that our students utilize to do their practice in, and there's music Japanese textbooks on this quote. So when Nijiro sent it to me and it was in Japanese, and I saw that the amount of money was that I needed to get your approval, I sent it back and I said, so I need this in English. So the quote that you have has the English written next to each one of those items. So they sent this right at the beginning of September that they put together their order. And so we're looking to purchase these curriculum resources from the Japanese consulate, and it is $29,362.39 for Nijiro.
Just over the threshold.
Just over the threshold.
Mrs.
One less
Burton.
music.
Do I remember correctly that the Japanese consulate at one point issued us a grant that we were able to use to purchase some of the curriculum materials in the past?
That's correct, they have.
Is that happening this year?
I do not believe that, that was an opportunity for us this year.
Okay, they weren't offering the grant, like they offered one and we applied and we got it? a few
I
years-
am not certain of that. We can double check that for you, but I normally when that is available, we absolutely jump on that. And that is determinant, you know, by the consulate, and I don't believe it was an annual event, but we can definitely look into that.
Okay,
Yeah, I can find out.
okay.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you.
You're welcome. One other.
Oh.
So this does cover our complete Nijiro grade span?
Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And that's it for the curriculum committee.
Thank you, Mrs. Acosta.
Thank you, Mrs. O'Brien.
Oh, thank you, Mrs. O'Brien. Thank you, Mrs. Acosta. Wonderful job. Moving on to item 6, Policy Committee. I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Frank.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Bradford.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We are going to look at instructional program IDDE, post-secondary credit opportunities, and Mrs. Oquist is going to take care of that for us tonight.
Thank you, Mrs. Frank. As you know, Mr. Itu has been working on this policy with you. This policy that you have before you reflects the modifications made in our most recent study session. And so this, I will read the post-secondary credit opportunities as it is currently being recommended to the board for first reading later this month. The Board of Education supports opportunities for students to receive post-secondary credit while attending high school. The school district shall provide educational opportunities for students to earn post-secondary credit while attending high school. The school district is required to pay the lesser of A, the actual charge for tuition, mandatory course fees, materials fees, and registration fees, or B, the state portion of the student's foundation allowance adjusted to the proportion of the school year they attend the post-secondary institution. Students who do not complete a dual enrollment course must repay the district. The legal references for this have also been updated. We have reflected the changes that the board has recommended for board policy IDDE, and we would request that that be put on for first reading at our September 23rd board meeting.
Any questions in regards to that one? Mrs. Burton?
I just wanted to make sure that folks do understand that that last sentence is part of this policy, which is that if the student does not pass that college course, the family does need to refund the district. It's important that if this is being taken advantage of, that students are very, very serious about it, because it is a significant sum of money for the school district to offer this opportunity. So I think it is appropriate that if they're able to do that, and it's a course that we don't offer, that the state of Michigan has made it such, and our district is participating, that we offer that post-secondary credit opportunity, but it's not just at a whim. And if the course is not going to be taken seriously, and if the course is not going to be passed, I hope families realize that they will need to reimburse the district for that cost.
Yes, and they also have to complete the course, so they can't drop out of the course or stop attending the course.
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford?
Yeah, I need to clarify that. It means if they don't complete the course, I mean, if they do fail the course or do not pass the course, they don't repay the district, right? If they have a non-passing grade, I think how does that work?
Yeah, they do repay. Yeah, no, they do repay if they fail the course.
Okay, so it's
Yes.
either, it's fail and not complete the,
That's
or
correct.
not complete the course.
Yes.
We probably need to add that in
Yeah,
there,
you
because
might
I
wanna-
read it as such, but you're
See,
right,
I
it
read
didn't say it as
Mhm.
such.
They didn't complete it for whatever reason.
I got the same out of
I
it
didn't think about
as you
not,
did.
if you fail the course.
So, Mrs. Oquist, you'll make those
We
updates,
will.
or Mr.
Okay.
E2 will, and get it to us before
Yes.
first reading? Okay, perfect. Anything else?
So students do not complete or
Or
pass.
Yes.
the course.
Complete and or pass.
And or
Gotcha.
pass, right, okay.
Okay. We'll be moving on to board policy JGCD, student medications. And Mrs. Sproul is going to take care of this for us. Thank you, Mrs. Sproul.
Good evening, Mrs. Sproul.
Hello.
It's a lot of pressure to be the last one on your agenda before the end of the night. My goodness. Wow. So we discussed this, the updates to this policy last week, just talking about our student medication delivery procedures and process that we have in place. You can see in your updated version in Board Book that the suggestions that you made last week, we took, and those are in blue within the updated version. So we made some clarifications in terms of the epinephrine prescription being provided by the parent, so that parents, it's clear, would provide that if if a physician has made the recommendation that a student have that at school. Going along, a lot of this is just updating things with the times since the last update was in 2018. So clarifying the title of the Director of Student Services, switching out the word school in place of building. Then when we get into administrative procedures, we've changed quite a bit since 2018, and, there were some updates previously. And we're doing a whole lot more electronically now, so we've made changes here to reflect that there isn't necessarily a medication log on paper, but this is something that's being stored in our MyStar system as well. Outside of that, these are all of the changes that we discussed last week. We also wanted to clarify that we're not going to be making changes to the recommendation that a physician makes. We're going to be following that healthcare plan or that medication authorization exactly as it's intended by the physician. So when we talk about, in rare instances, and I'm talking on page 3 here, point C, when we talk about there are some limited opportunities where we may use administrative judgment for medications. That's things like storage of the medication, who's going to be administering it, and things like that. We would never change the dose that a student is to receive. When we go to our exhibits, we're removing one of the exhibits, and that's the sample letter that goes home to families. We found that many of our buildings have their own individual procedures for that. So we're taking that out of there, but we still wanted to show you that that letter was part of the document previously. We're going to keep in Exhibit B, which is our medication authorization form. That's something that most of our physicians use and share with us. And then Exhibit C is the example. This is the paper copy of how we used to track medication, but sometimes the secretary or the person administering the medication isn't always able to be right at the computer at that time. So we wanted to make sure we gave them a tool that showed all the information that they need to be gathering so that they are sure to gather that information at the time they're administering the medication. And then they can go back and put that in the electronic system later. So that's kind of it in a nutshell, but some just much needed changes over time.
Any questions or comments? JGCD?
Thank you for incorporating the suggestions from the meeting.
Absolutely, thank you, thank you.
And it seems like we have more, I don't know if this is accurate, you would be able to say more students needing more medication, and so we need to make sure that we have a streamlined, very detailed process of how we're taking care of this, so that things don't get lost or mishandled or that sort of thing, right? Is there more students probably, or not necessarily?
I think that we have some students with some pretty significant medical concerns, and I think that just always makes a staff member uncomfortable with the unknown.
Yes.
So the more we can make things clear and concise and easy to read, especially in the event of an emergency, that's going to do well for students, that's going to do well for staff. So we just try to do more and more of that.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and then that wraps up Policy Committee. President Bradford?
Why, thank you, Mrs. Frank. All right, and thank you, Mrs. Sprow. All right, we're moving on to item 7, the Personnel Committee, and I'll turn it over to Vice President Johnson.
Thank you, President Bradford. We don't have anything on the schedule tonight. Superintendent Oquist, anything additional?
We do not, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. That concludes us.
Why, thank you. And item 8, the Legislative Committee, Mrs. Jarvis.
Thank you, President Bradford. Legislative Committee has nothing on tonight's agenda. Mrs. Oquist?
We do not have anything on the agenda. I will certainly mention that we are going to be getting out more information to our parents and to our community about the Wayne County Enhancement Millage, which will be on the ballot on November 5th. That, as you know, the Wayne County Enhancement Millage is an essential piece of our school funding. We receive about $6 million a year from the enhancement millage, so that is up for renewal. And I will be taking part. I've been asked to represent Wayne County along with a couple of my superintendent colleagues on a legislative roundtable tomorrow with a number of different media outlets. And so we will be speaking to the impact that the enhancement millage has had on our students and our staff and our school districts. So I'm very pleased to be doing that. I know that you would agree with me when we see the resources we were able to provide prior to 2016 and then after that has been significant. We've shared with you and with our community the then and now slides for our staffing, what its class sizes look like, bargaining agreements, mental health supports, school safety supports. And so that is thanks to the funding that were provided by the Wayne County Enhancement Millage. So I will be out speaking on this and sharing information with our families, and we certainly encourage anyone in our community to be well-informed on this topic.
Thank you. Any questions for Mrs. Oquist? Then that concludes the legislative portion.
Thank you, Mrs. Jarvis, and believe it or not, we're at the end of our meeting tonight, so I wish everybody a good evening, and we'll hopefully see you at our regular meeting, which will be scheduled for next Monday, September 23rd at 6:30 PM. So, good evening, everybody. Have a good night.